Chapter 1465. Ordinary cloud whales were docile and honest, and they didn't have any ambition. Even if they had the ability to cross the void sea, they didn't have the thought of expanding. They only hoped to reproduce in a stable way. But Yun Jiang was different from the other clansmen. He was brave and dared to take risks. At the critical moment, he also dared to make up his mind. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to Jiahua boundary. He moved very quickly. Without waiting for Zhan and Su to think, he made an oath with them. At this time, it was impossible for them to go back on their words. But he didn't let them go immediately. He said that he would wait for 2 days to arrange some things, and then he could let them take the cloud whale away. Although the two of them were dissatisfied, seeing that there was hope for them to escape, they didn't want to cause any more trouble, so they endured. Yun Jiang led Hanwu to the cave house where the Tong Tian compass was placed, and said, "I'm going to go on a long trip. I don't know when I can come back. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 100 years. I have something to tell you." Hanwu was a little scared, but he still tried his best to maintain his composure on the surface. He bowed and said, "Master, please tell me." Yun Jiang looked at him and nodded secretly and said, "I have an internal cultivation technique here. I will pass it to you now. You need to remember it carefully." As she said, she passed a chant into his ears. He practiced the path of strength. The secret technique of Jiahua boundary was somewhat similar to this, but the spiritual opportunity of this boundary was insufficient. He needed a lot of external medicine to make up for it. He brought a lot this time. Since he was going to Yunshu boundary this time, he left all of them for this disciple. Then he took out a magic weapon and handed it to Hanwu. "This magic weapon is for you to protect yourself. But before that, you need to refine it." After passing on the method of refining the magic weapon, he took out the two-realm dial and said, "I can't tell you my origin now. It's not that I don't want to tell you, but I'm afraid that if things change, it will hurt you. You should keep this magic weapon. It's used to communicate with the sect, but the spiritual opportunity in it has been exhausted. It will take at least 10 years to be able to be used again. If I haven't come back by then, you can try to open it. At that time, the elders in the sect will come to talk to you." He still had a lot of things that he didn't have time to teach Hanwu, so he left a few pieces of paper for the talisman to study. Finally, he said, "One more thing, the cloud whale in the lake, I have covered it with a formation. I have taught you the method to get in and out. Remember to maintain it carefully in the future. If it wakes up, ask me one thing on his behalf." Hanwu knelt down, kowtowed, and said, "Master, I will remember it, and I will not forget it in the future." Yun Jiang called him up and said, "Your identity is sensitive, so you can practice here in the future. There are water food pills left by Master, and the qi gathering array that Master has set up. The external medicine I left for you is also enough. Don't go out before you have the power to protect yourself." Hanwu nodded seriously. Yun Jiang took out the Tong Tian dial from the ground and put it in his stomach. He was going to bring this thing into the Yunshu boundary. Unless he was willing to spit it out, no one would be able to find it. Leaving Hanwu in the cave house, he left the cave house alone, returned to the shabby house, took out a message talisman, and placed it on the table. After arranging everything, he came to the lake and revealed his true form. Then he waited there quietly. Another day passed. The message talisman moved, and a spirit image left behind by Yun Jiang appeared. It walked into the woodshed, and because it had no physical form, it went through the wall and said to Zhan and Su, "The two of you, I have finished dealing with the matter at hand. I will let you go as I promised. I have 2 incantations here. After you finish chanting, you will be free." Then he recited the incantations. Zhan and Su followed the incantations, and after a while, they felt the restrictions on their bodies disappear, and they regained their freedom. Yun Jiang said, "The ancient demonic whale is in the lake. You two can take it away at any time. I will leave now." Then his figure slowly faded, and finally disappeared without a trace like a bubble. Seeing him like this, Zhan Moping was enlightened and thought, "I was wondering why this person needed a few days to prepare. It seems like he is afraid of the great might heavenly palace, so he used these few days to escape. Damn it, I have made an oath, and I can't violate it anymore. Fine, this time I will let this person off lightly." He said to Su Weiniang, "This person finally left, junior sister. We have been waiting for a long time. After we find the cloud whale, we will go back." Su Weiniang said, "I will listen to senior brother." Jean Moping took a step forward, and smoke rose up as he brought the two of them to the lake. After a while, they arrived at the shore and saw the demonic whale floating on the surface of the water. It was surrounded by dense clouds. No matter how strong it was, just its appearance was not bad. He was very satisfied and clasped his hands together as he said, "Fellow Taoist, I believe that Yun Jiang has already told you to be my protector and follow me." Su Weiniang looked at him curiously and said, "Senior brother, what are you talking about with a demonic creature that has yet to transform?" Jean Moping smiled and said, "Junior sister has always been cultivating in seclusion, and you have never come out to train, so you probably have never come into contact with a great demon. Ancient demonic creatures like this, even if they have yet to transform, have spiritual intelligence, and can even speak." Yun Jiang looked at the two of them and blew out a cloud, and a spell contract floated out. Jean Moping took it and saw that it was the condition they had agreed on earlier, and he couldn't help but feel resentful. If it was possible, he wanted to sign a master and servant contract, but how could Yun Jiang leave such a loophole? This had already been decided when they made the oath, so he couldn't change it on his own. He could only grit his teeth and sign it. Then, he saw that the body of the cloud whale gradually shrunk to about 3 feet before stopping, and its whole body was shrouded in a cloud. He knew that the spell contract had been decided, and he cupped his hands, saying, "I will have to rely on fellow Taoist from now on." Yun Jiang said, "There is no need to be so courteous, fellow Taoist. Since I am willing to follow you, I will do my best to protect you." Jean Moping was pleasantly surprised, and he hurriedly said, "How should I address fellow Taoist?" Yun Jiang said, "You can call me Jean Mang." Su Weiniang saw that he had obtained an ancient demonic whale as a protector, and she was a little envious. Even the elders in the palace might not be able to find such a demonic creature, so she said, "Senior martial brother, can you lend it to me for a few days?" Jean Moping said seriously, "Junior martial sister, you are wrong. Fellow Taoist Jean Mang is a protector, and he might be able to save our lives one day. We should respect him, so how can we lend it to him?" At the same time, he transmitted his voice, "Junior martial sister, you are making things difficult for me by saying this now. This fellow Taoist might not be willing to lend it to me, but after I get familiar with it, I believe he won't reject me if we bring this up again in the future." Su Weiniang glared at him and didn't say anything else. Jean Moping released a brocade cloud, and he stood on it with Su Weiniang. He said, "Fellow Taoist, please come up as well. We will return to Yunshu realm now." Yun Jiang floated up as instructed. Jean Moping smiled in his heart. Although there were some twists and turns this time, and he almost lost his life, he still managed to complete this task. It could be considered as a blessing in disguise. He circulated his magic power, and the brocade cloud slowly rose up. Soon, it reached a higher altitude. After traveling for about 2 days, the speed slowed down, and Jean Moping said, "Fellow Taoist, we are almost there. The gate in the past is where my Yunshu realm is. Once we get there, Taoist will know that this place is not something that Cornerflower realm can compare to." Yun Jiang looked over and suddenly realized that there was a hidden gate in the sky. It was somewhat similar to the gate used to enter and exit the heavenly abode small realm. However, only living beings like Yun Jiang who could travel through the void could see it. Jean Moping took out a bronze talisman and said, "There are many rules in the Great Might Heavenly Palace, so I will have to trouble fellow Taoists to follow me. Don't stray too far away." Then he rode the brocade cloud and flew toward the gate. At this moment, Yun Jiang suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. He realized that he might have overlooked something. Ordinary methods could not detect the sky-piercing gui hidden in the stomach, but there seemed to be almighty beings in this realm, and there might be arrangements in the gate of 2 realms. However, this was only his guess, and he might not be able to find anything. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer to the realm gate, he finally made up his mind. Even without the sky-piercing gui, he could still find a way to connect to the realm in the future. Thus, He decisively circulated his mana and destroyed this instrument. Jean Moping knew nothing about this. He held the talisman tightly in his hand and chanted a few words. Then, a ray of light rose from under his feet and enveloped the three of them. Only then did Yunjiang notice that the brocade cloud was also an instrument used to travel between realms. He asked, "Fellow Taoist, if someone robbed your instrument, how would you go back?" Jean Moping answered without thinking, "There are elders guarding the gate. There's no need to worry about outsiders sneaking in." It was just a simple sentence, but Yunjiang heard some useful information from it. This meant that not only the people of the Great Might Heavenly Palace could pass through the gate, but this force could not identify the identity of the people inside, so they could only send people to guard the gate. However, this was only the case for one place, and it was the same for all the other places. He had to find out more in the future. While they were talking, they had already entered the realm gate. Yunjiang felt his body become light, then heavy again. Then his vision became bright, and when he could see clearly, he found himself standing in a magnificent hall. There were golden pillars and jade walls, and the ceiling was like the sky. There were bronze statues of all kinds of ferocious beasts on two sides. At a glance, there were more than 100 of them, and they were arranged from the platform they were standing on all the way to the bottom. Jean Moping said proudly, "Fellow Taoist, these are all great demons that tried to invade through the gate, but they were all captured and killed by the almighties of my palace. Now they are cast into bronze statues and placed here to intimidate those demons." At this moment, they heard a loud and clear voice. "Which lower palace disciple are you two from? Quickly take out the token talisman. Do you still need me to remind you?" Jean Moping raised his head and saw a golden-robed Taoist with a red face. His gaze was sharp, and it swept over the two of them from time to time, making them feel unapproachable. Su Weinian couldn't help but lower her head and said, "It's Elder Hong." Jean Moping's expression also froze, and he groaned in his heart. He didn't expect to meet this person. He immediately took out the token talisman, held it above his head, and said, "Elder Hong, please take a look." Elder Hong took a look and said, "So it's a disciple under Wang Weidao." His gaze swept over Yunjiang, and there was a hint of undisguised greed in his eyes. He said, "When a disciple goes out, he shouldn't casually bring back a demon. How can you break this rule knowingly?" Jean Moping hurriedly said, "Elder Hong, please allow me to report. This ancient demon whale is already Disciple's companion. Disciple will explain clearly to the palace." Elder Hong snorted and said, "This is also against the rules. How can a demon freely pass through the palace? How about this, I will take care of it for you first. After you explain to the palace, you can come to me to take it back." As he said this, he stretched out his hand and took it from Yunjiang. Chapter 1466. In the Junchen realm, in a barren land, two forces were fighting each other. The magical powers collided with each other, extending from the three Earth stars to the void. Above the Earth stars, several rainbows flickered, covering the sun and moon. For a moment, there was no distinction between day and night. Somewhere high up in the Earth star, on a snow-covered mountain, there was a majestic Dharma palace. Hishurin was standing in the main hall, slightly raising his head, watching the fierce battle in the sky through the jade water screen. The battle of about 10 true monarchs was already earth-shattering. Under the impact of the aftermath, the Earth star under his feet was showing signs of collapsing. Only the occult orbs hanging in the sky were not affected at all. A ray of clear light suddenly descended from the sky, piercing through the atmosphere and landed in the hall. The green-robed Taoist appeared and rushed forward. He said anxiously, "Senior Marshal Brother, the enemy is outnumbered and their numbers are increasing. I heard that Bei Xiangtong is also rushing over. You'd better leave before this person arrives." Hishurin was not frightened by this news. He calmly judged, Bei Xiangtong will not come. Otherwise, why would he send these cultivators here? Since he already knows where we are, he alone is enough to annihilate all of us. This news must have been released to disturb my state of mind. The Taoist in a green robe was startled, and then he became very angry. He was actually disturbed by this news and lost his will to fight. He said angrily, "I'll go up and fight them again." Shiren stopped him and said, "Don't go. This generation's strength is far above us. If we continue fighting like this, it will only increase the number of casualties. It won't do us any good." He saw clearly from below that there were a total of 7 true monarchs sent to hunt them down, and they were all from the original Junshin realm. Not a single 9-continent grotto heaven came. But on the Qi accumulation palace's side, including him, there were only 4 people with the same cultivation base. Moreover, there were more enemies on the way. Although there was a formation here to rely on, it was impossible for them to win this battle. The Taoist in a green robe said with grief and indignation, "It's all because of the Qi accumulation palace that we leaked the news. Why do we have to end up like this?" Shiren also sighed and said, "It's all our fault for not noticing. We can't blame anyone else." Who would have thought that not only did his senior brother seek refuge with the 9 continents, even the Qi accumulation palace had long since become the other party's people. The plan that was originally discussed between the 2 sects had become a joke in the end. In fact, there was no other way. In the face of the formation that the 9 states were gradually building, they could either sit and wait for death or fight back. However, the strength of Yuliang alone was far from enough to fight back, so they could only choose to join forces with the Qi accumulation palace. After only a few years, the situation that they had been trying so hard to maintain had completely collapsed. Also, the enemy had found the location of this occult orb, which was the last place that they could defend on the surface. Although he still had a way out, once this place was lost, many of the onlookers would probably completely lose confidence and fall to the side of the 9 continents. Shiren knew that he couldn't afford to lose this time. He said resolutely, "You withdraw all your men and retreat to the occult orbs to guard the restrictive spell formation. If you can't resist it, retreat to a small world and hide. I'll stay here alone." The green-robed cultivator opened his eyes wide and asked, "Senior brother, what are you going to do?" Shiren said, "Don't worry. I don't want to die yet. Right now, I can take that step at any time. When the enemy arrives, I can teach them a lesson." The green-robed cultivator was overjoyed. He asked, "Senior brother, you're going to succeed?" Shiren nodded with a smile. The green-robed cultivator said excitedly, "All right, I'll go call them back right now." He turned around and leaped up into the sky like a beam of light. Watching him leave, Shiren's eyes gradually turned solemn. On the surface, he seemed to be very confident, but in fact, he had no choice but to take this step. If he could, he would rather stay in this realm for a longer time and try to break through more barriers. By taking this step in a hurry, it might seem like he could defeat the enemy, but even if he could win now, the loss would be irreparable in the long run. He heaved a sigh and sat down on the cushion. Then, he activated the restrictive spell formation of this realm. Breaking through the realm was not a trivial matter, and there was a possibility of failure. He had to try his best. At this moment, seeing that the survivors had abandoned this place and returned to the occult orbs, the 7 true cultivators all stopped their attacks, knowing that they couldn't break through this realm. Someone said disdainfully, "These guys are doomed. With the talismans, we can find them even if they hide in a heaven or a small world." The person was called Qi Liao. He was one of Bei Xiangtong's subordinates. After observing for a while, he said, "No, something is wrong." He was very experienced in battles. Just now, when the survivors were retreating, they seemed to be at ease. It was obvious that these guys were not at the end of their rope yet. A true cultivator surnamed Wang asked, "True cultivator Qi, what's wrong?" Qi Liao didn't explain further. He just asked, "How long will it take to break through this restrictive spell?" Wang thought for a while and said, "This occult orb is not like the Earth star just now. The protective spell formation might have been set up by Kong Yin himself. It's very hard to break through. Conservatively speaking, it will take 4 to 5 years." Qi Liao said, "A few years is not a problem. We have the entire Junshin realm behind us. They won't be able to outlast us. Go, send some people to set up formations in the distance and surround this occult orb. This way we can attack and defend at the same time." Wang Zhenjuan was surprised. Do we still need to defend? Qi Liao said coldly, General Jun, leave attacking the survivors to me. Just do as I say. Don't ask too many questions. Everyone looked at each other and left to carry out the order. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. At this moment, the number of true cultivators in Qi Liao's formation had increased by 14, which was double of the original number. However, many people had lost their patience to wait. This was the void, where spiritual opportunity was scarce. Cultivating here would take twice the effort for half the result. Besides, nobody knew how long this situation would last. Wang Zhenjuan's cultivation was relatively high among them. Therefore, he took the initiative to go to Qi Liao and asked, True cultivator Qi, we've been waiting here for 3 years. What if this guy escapes to the other side of the void through a small world? Qi Liao said, Even if he escapes, the occult orbs will be left behind, which will bring us a greater harvest. Without the occult orbs, it will be even more difficult for this guy to achieve anything. We don't need to worry about him. Wang Zhenjuan was very dissatisfied with his conservative strategy. He said, Then maybe there are other occult orbs in Yuliangism. Qi Liao, however, said in a normal tone, As long as they don't give up on reviving Yuliangism, they will find them sooner or later. If they can find all the occult orbs in Yuliangism, they might be able to stop the legacy and solve the problem once and for all. Wang Zhenjuan was so angry that he laughed. True cultivator Qi, aren't you being too optimistic? If it were so easy, would we still be here? Qi Liao said, Then we'll figure out a solution when the time comes. Otherwise, what's the use of you and me? Huh. Wang Zhenjuan sensed something unusual from his words. He looked at Qi Liao thoughtfully and didn't argue anymore. Instead, he turned around and walked out. Another month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, a streak of shocking aura suddenly soared up from the occult orbs and formed a rainbow bridge in the void. Then, a young cultivator walked up to them step by step. The dozen true cultivators outside were all shocked to see that. Wang Zhenjuan said in a trembling voice, A sovereign emperor? This He Shuren has become a sovereign emperor? Qi Liao was surprised too, but he didn't show any panic. Instead, he sneered and looked around. Seeing that nobody was running away, he nodded. But then again, he could at least protect himself in the formation. If he ran out, he would be dead for sure. He Shuren stepped to the front of the formation and sighed. You are all from the Junshin realm. Why are you working for the 9 continents? I guess you have all signed a contract with the 9 continents. I can't persuade you to change your mind, so I have to take your lives. Just as everyone was panicking, a deep voice rang out. Fellow Taoist, have you asked for my permission before taking the lives of my disciples? He Shuren was shocked in his heart, and he turned to look over. He saw a Taoist had suddenly appeared in space, and he was sitting on a ball of cloud. His eyes squinted as he said, Andy Bei, Xiang Tong? The moment he saw the other party, he came to a sudden realization. What was fake was real, and what was real was fake. It wasn't that the other party didn't come, it was just that he didn't want to make a move. If his cultivation hadn't advanced another level, perhaps he wouldn't have come out. He sighed heavily in his heart. It turned out that he was already in the other party's calculations. He thought he had succeeded. He looked at the formation that surrounded the occult orb. If there was no one to hold them back, he would only need half a day to break them. But with Bei Xiangtong here, it was obviously impossible to leave. He looked up and said loudly, I guess Andy Bei has already set up a trap. If that's the case, let's decide the winner here. As he said that, he had already swept up rays of jade light and blasted towards the sky. Bei Xiangtong had been waiting for this moment. Killing a sovereign emperor was completely different from killing a true cultivator. At least on the 9 continents side, it was more important. In fact, he had been trying to lead and force the other party to do so. Now, it was finally time to reap the rewards. He had already severed his past body, so he didn't pay any attention to this person's attack. He circulated his magic power and used his best divine ability. In an instant, the void bloomed with a brilliance that eclipsed the sun and moon. The battle between mortal metamorphosis cultivators naturally shook the heavens and the earth. The battle between the two lasted for a whole year, completely destroying the heavenly domain. Hishiorin had nowhere to run and finally died after exhausting his vitality. The followers of Yuliangism who followed him were also captured. None of them escaped. Although there were still many survivors hiding in this world, with the fall of the biggest flag, it was difficult for them to cause any more trouble. This news was quickly spread by Sima Quan to the mountain and sea realm. After learning of this, Zhang Yan understood that the matter of the Junchen realm could be put aside for the cultivators of the other sects to deal with. Next, the sects of the 9 continents would probably focus their attention on the Hornflower realm. Chapter 1467. Temple of Duzhen, Xuanzisi Realm. Yuan Zhangqing walked on the surface of the water. Although it was only a small realm, it was still a vast and endless sea. He looked up and with a thought, the clouds were swept away, and spots of light appeared on the top of the sky. This was one of the few small realms created by the Tai Ming Patriarch. Not only did it have day and night, the 4 seasons, but the sun, moon, and stars could also be seen. It seemed to change according to each person's state of mind. However, he later realized that this was not the case. Only those who cultivated the sensory scripture would have such a feeling. He had cultivated here for a long time, and his spiritual vigor was interconnected. It was not just the sea under his feet, it was also the reflection of his heart lake. As his thoughts changed, it would naturally change. Withdrawing his gaze, he sat down cross-legged and emptied his mind. The originally slightly rippling seawater actually calmed down in an instant. It was like a boundless water mirror, reflecting the stars in the sky. The countless rays of light seemed to be very far away, but also seemed to be within reach. Ever since he entered this realm, he had been accumulating for close to 50 years. Now, he was at the juncture of cultivation, and it was time for him to take that step. He calmed his mind, and in an instant, it was as if he was thrown into an endless abyss. At the same time, an empty whirlpool appeared behind him, and a large amount of spiritual vigor was sucked in. Yuan Chen's cave spirit scripture had always been cultivated successfully, especially when one stepped into the grotto heaven. Due to the surge of mana, one could feel all kinds of chi dynamics in the outside world, and even everything was mixed up. There was no distinction between oneself and others. The cultivator had to find his true place in this, and then return to his original self. However, if he was affected by external influences and lost his heart, it was very likely that he would fall into it. In the tens of thousands of years of history of Qinsong School, there were many failures. This was the most difficult hurdle, but if one could pass it, it would be a whole new world. Most people would try to discern the external qi to see themselves, but Yuan Zhangqing did not care about this. He firmly believed that he was here, and his heart was with him. He only needed to guard it well, and there was no need for external influences. This method might not be the best, but it was the most suitable for him. In reality, every person who cultivated this cultivation method would eventually walk on a different path. There were no predecessors who could imitate them. This was also one of the reasons why this cultivation method could not be passed down the orthodox path. When faced with the numerous thoughts that surged over, he'd maintained his intelligence from the beginning until the end, and he was like an eternal and indestructible star in space. Time passed slowly, and it was hard to know how much time had passed. In the darkest depths, a bright light suddenly exploded, and the seawater beneath him boiled at the same time. The reflected starlight in the water actually flew up together with the starlight in the sky, and merged with the starlight in the sky at this moment. The boundary between reality and illusion had been lost, and it was impossible to tell which was which. When the sound stopped, an extremely magnificent Dharma appeared in this world. In the middle of it, there was a whirlpool of light embedded in the void, and outside it, there were stars, arranged in order, and they were moving slowly around it. If anyone from the outside were here, they would be able to tell that this was an image of all the stars in the mountain and sea realm. However, as time passed, all the stars became dimmer and dimmer, gradually returning to the vortex of light. But soon after, as if they had walked from one end to another, the stars reappeared one by one, and the cycle repeated itself, changing back and forth. Zhang Yan was in the middle of meditating when he sensed the surging energy and knew that another disciple had stepped into the heavenly passage realm. He looked over, and his gaze pierced through the realm pass into the Xuanluan Sea realm. In his eyes, the Dharma idol was not simply reflecting the stars in the sky. It was using its own vastness to fuse with all living things. If he were in another world, the Dharma idol would have a completely different appearance. If the Dharma idol was used to fight an enemy, it would not only be able to sense the changes in the outside world through the energy, but could also rely on the evolution of the universe to see the signs of the mysteries. He thought about it for a moment. The primal hour spirit sensing art could be used to sense the energy of the gods, and to illuminate all living things. Logically speaking, as long as one was knowledgeable enough, and had a deep understanding of the great Tao, then they would have limitless possibilities. However, it also depended on the person. If one was too greedy for perfection, it would drag down one's cultivation and cause harm to oneself. This disciple must have flown between the two worlds and seen the heavens beyond the heavens, which was why he had such an image. However, he did not recklessly create the image of the void essence sea, which meant that he knew his place. However, because it was just now, there were still many traces of carving. Only by advancing in cultivation could the imperfections be removed, and the Dharma idol would become one with nature. However, during this process, one's heart must not waver, and not be shaken in the slightest. This path was destined to be difficult and dangerous. How far one could go would depend on oneself. He flicked his finger and released a ray of spiritual light, summoning Jing Yu into the inner world, and said, "When Jing Qing has calmed down his mana, ask him to come and see me." Jing Yu replied, "I understand." After a few months, Yuan Jingqing's Dharma idol slowly retracted. He slowly got up and stood on the surface of the sea, looking at the churning waves. At this moment, he could not help but think about the past. If it wasn't for his master's trip to Donglai and accepted him into Tao, he would not be where he was today. As he thought about this, he felt something in his heart, and he chanted. Mysterious sounds resounded through the cloud platform. The echoes did not stop. The fog fell on Donglai. Calamities arose. The sun and moon dyed red. The world mourned. Moving state Lu Chenkuan was rebuilt. The wind and clouds could change heaven and earth. The celestial mountain beyond the world was restored to its original state. The noble spirit existed forever. The righteous path still existed. The voice echoed in all directions, causing the waves to surge, and did not disperse for a long time. A flying boat came from afar and quickly arrived in front of them. Jing Yu bowed and said with a smile, "Shenren Yuan, Master wants to talk to you. Please come to this boat, I will bring you there." Yuan Jingqing said solemnly, "Since Master is calling, I will go immediately." He leaped onto the boat and said, "Thank you, Junior Marshal Brother Jing." Jing Yu smiled and bowed, "You are too kind." He waved the talisman in his hand, and in the Shenyuan small world, he went to the side of the earthly fire heavenly cauldron. Seeing Zhang Yan sitting on the cliff, he quickly went forward, knelt down and kowtowed, "Disciple greets Master." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You have already achieved grotto heaven. From now on, there is no need to be so polite in front of Master. Get up." Yuan Jingqing said, and stood up respectfully. Zhang Yan said, "Master has observed the Dharma that you have achieved, and it has never been seen by anyone before. You have great potential in the future, but it is even more difficult to cultivate, and there is no one to learn from. You can only rely on yourself to explore, and how far you can go in the future will depend on your own efforts and fate." Yuan Jingqing said, "I heard that there are countless almighty beings in the heavens. Disciple also wants to go and take a look. I will not slack off." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "If that is so, Master will give you a name for the Dharma today as encouragement." He pondered for a while and said, "The heavens have a constant and orderly movement. The Qi of the One Yuan circulates again. This Dharma can be called Yuan Tian Qi of righteousness in the future." Yuan Jingqing bowed and said, "Disciple thanks Master for bestowing a name." Zhang Yan said, "Just now, you have achieved something, and your Qi dynamic has manifested, so you still need to do more harmonization. There are some taboos that you need to understand, You can go back to isolated cultivation for a period of time, and when you can control your mana freely, Master still needs you to do something. As he said that, he flicked his finger, and a spiritual light went into the disciple's forehead, and then he said, "Go." Yuan Zhangqing bowed again and said, "Disciple will take his leave." At this moment he only felt a surge of spiritual vigor, and the scenery in front of him changed, and he returned to the original place. He carefully thought about the changes just now, and realized that he had no clue, and knew that it was not the threshold that he could reach, so he settled his mind, sat down, and sorted out his qi dynamic. Zhang Yan was still sitting on the cliff, looking at the treasure that was not yet formed in the heavenly cauldron of earthly fire. Over the years, Zhang Chan had found another planet, but it was different from the previous ones. Although there were living creatures on this planet, most of them were barbaric and tyrannical. Moreover, the planet was filled with an omnipresent red light. Such an abnormal situation made him suspect that there was something hidden on this planet. After a few explorations, he was even more sure of his guess, but the thing seemed to be moving on its own, and every time he was about to get close, the fierce monsters on the planet would come out to stop him, so he never succeeded. Although Zhang Chan could fight with the people of the heavenly abode, the fierce monsters were not weak either. After all, he was only one person, and his insects could not fly for long in the red light. As for his disciples, their cultivation was still weak, and they could not help much. Now that the formation between the planet beyond the heavens and the land of the mountain and sea realm had been completed, it was reasonable to ask Lu Yenni and the others for help. However, Zhang Yan put this matter aside, because he felt that Yuan Zhangqing had a chance of becoming a heavenly abode, and that everyone in the sect had to go out and gain experience. Not only could they make contributions to the sect, but they could also familiarize themselves with their magic power and divine abilities through battle. He wanted this disciple to go to the planet beyond the heavens, and after the matter was settled, he would establish a lower house there, and then he would truly be in control of the few planets there. After a few days, Jingyu entered the world, and came to the cliff, bowed, and said, "Master, Taoist Sima has returned." Zhang Yan was not surprised, because he knew that Sima Quan had returned a few years ago. He said, "Invite him to the main hall to wait for me." Jingyu accepted the order and left. Zhang Yan made a few hand signs at the dragon's heart to prevent any changes. Then he called Mountain River Child over to take care of the furnace fire. With a thought, he had already left the small world and arrived at the main hall. Sima Quan was already standing in the hall, and seeing him, he bowed and said, "Greetings, Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan said, "This time, Taoist Sima has put in a lot of effort to successfully occupy the Junqian realm. It was really hard." Sima Quan said, "Taoist Zhang is too kind, Taoist Sima has also benefited a lot." Zhang Yan nodded. Compared to when he went to the Junqian realm, Sima Quan's strength had increased greatly, but this was something he was happy to see. The higher this person's cultivation was, the easier it was for him to do things. After chatting for a while, he said, "Although Taoist Sima has returned, I'm afraid he will not be free. There is one thing that can only be done if you go." Sima Quan already had a plan and said, "Taoist Sima, please instruct me." Zhang Yan said, "I'm sure Taoist Sima has heard about the Hornflower realm. This time, I want to invite Taoist Sima to go there and find out what the so-called upper realm looks like." Sima Quan thought for a while, then bowed and said, "I heard that the Hornflower realm is even more powerful than the Junqian realm. This time, Taoist Sima needs to refine a talisman, so I'm afraid it will have to be delayed for a while." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "This matter is not urgent, Taoist Sima can decide when to leave." Chapter 1468. Reeks. Inside the cornerflower boundary, 30 years had passed since Yun Jiang left. Hanwu cultivated in the cave every day, and occasionally went to the lake under the cover of the talisman to see if the cloud whale had woken up. At this moment, he looked like a young man in his 20s. Before a mystic martial artist formed a heaven meridian, their lifespan was only about 100 years, but it was not much different from an ordinary person. The reason why he could maintain such a youthful appearance was because of the breathing technique, and because he stayed in the Qi gathering array for a long time. Even though he did not form a heaven meridian, his vitality was maintained extremely strong. In fact, because he lacked the conditions to open his meridians, he could not enter the path of qi cultivation like a qi practitioner. Moreover, in the technique taught by Yun Jiang, there were some mystic martial artists' cultivation techniques mixed in. He had actually embarked on a path of harmony, and now he could be called a qi practitioner. After finishing his homework for the day, he slowly withdrew his qi and got up to practice a set of secret martial skills. At this time, when he waved his fists and legs, they were no longer visible on the surface. Instead, they were incomparably restrained, hiding all the power within his body. It was like a buried volcano, unmoving and inconspicuous, but once it erupted, it could shake the mountains and rivers. Now that more than 10 types of monster bloodlines in his body had been stimulated, he could also fly in the air. Although he had never fought with a heaven meridian cultivator, with the help of magic treasures, he was confident that his fighting ability was not inferior to anyone in the realm. After his body became active, he felt refreshed. Looking at the water, he knew that it was already night outside, so he walked out step by step according to the array. Soon he was out of the cave, and then he flew into the air. Not long after, he came to the side of the lake. After checking for a while, he found that the restriction was still intact, and he unconsciously relaxed. Among the talismans left by Yun Jiang, there were many shallow alchemy techniques and formation methods. For his own cultivation, he also had to maintain the qi gathering array in the cave and the big array to hide the cloud whale. In these years, he had learned a lot, but the cloud whale had always been asleep and had never woken up. At first, he had some expectations, but then he gradually got used to it. However, when he was about to turn around and leave, he found that a pair of eyes in the lake was staring at him. There seemed to be a lot of vigilance and probing hidden in the eyes. He couldn't help but be startled for a moment, and then immediately became happy. He took 2 steps forward and said, "Sir, you are awake." However, the cloud whale took a step back and said, "Why did you trap me here?" In fact, it had already woken up a few days ago. It could sense a familiar aura from Hanwu's body, but it had never seen that familiar aura, so it had been pretending not to wake up until today. Hanwu calmly said, "This formation is not to trap you, but to guard against external enemies. I was entrusted by my teacher to wait here for you to wake up." The cloud whale asked, "May I know who your teacher is?" Cambrian said, "My master's surname is Yun Jiang." When the cloud whale heard that his surname was Yun, he became slightly excited and asked, "Then where is your teacher?" Hanwu's expression was a little sad. "I don't know where teacher went. When I rescued you from the Qian dynasty palace, a few people who claimed to be from the upper realm came to find you. Teacher fought with them and then let them go. Later, teacher said that he was going to a place, and he didn't know when he would come back. Now 30 years have passed, and he still hasn't come back." The cloud whale was a little disappointed. "Then did your teacher leave anything behind?" Hanwu thought for a moment, then shook his head. Although Yun Jiang had a lot of things, he couldn't give them to the cloud whale. He only said, "Teacher, I just want to ask you what happened that year?" The cloud whale was silent for a while, then said, "So that's how it is. If your teacher can ask this question, it can't be those people." He moved his body and said, "This place is too narrow. You can remove these barriers outside, I will tell you." Hanwu hurriedly said, "No, this is to hide the aura. If you remove it, I am afraid those people will come to find you again. You should wait for teacher to come back." The cloud whale didn't move, it whispered, "What if your teacher doesn't come back?" Hanwu firmly said, "No, teacher will definitely come back." The cloud whale didn't say anything, as if to express its dissatisfaction. Hanwu saw that he couldn't get anything out of the cloud whale, and he couldn't force it, so he also lost interest in talking. He said, "I am leaving." He hesitated and said, "I will come to see you every day." When he returned to the cave, he suddenly thought of the 2-realm dial, so he took it out. When Yun Jiang left, he said that when the spiritual opportunity was full, the sect would contact him. He could feel that a large amount of spiritual opportunity was absorbed into the 2-realm dial every day. Now it seemed that he could use it, but he didn't know how to contact the sect, so he put it aside again. After another month, when he was meditating, The two-realm dial suddenly overflowed with spiritual light, and he woke up. He jumped up from the cattail hassock and thought, could it be that someone from the sect came to find me? He hurriedly took a few steps forward and pressed the button according to Yunjiang's instruction. A ray of light rushed up, and after a while, a Taoist with a gloomy face appeared. His eyes seemed to be able to shine into the depths of one's soul. He couldn't help but take a step back, then he stood still and bowed. Disciple Hanwu greets the honorable master of the sect. The Taoist looked at him and said, Who is Yunjiang Jinren? Hanwu carefully said, It is my teacher. The Taoist said, So you are the disciple of Yunjiang Jinren. Has he come back now? Hanwu sighed and said, My teacher has been gone for 30 years, and there is still no news from him. The Taoist asked a lot of details, and Hanwu didn't hide anything, so he answered one by one. Finally, the Taoist said, I know, in a few years, I will come to your Jihua boundary. There are some things I still need to ask you, just wait for me here. Hanwu quickly said, I will wait here, how should I address you? The Taoist said, My name is Sima Quan. After that, his figure disappeared, and the spiritual light also gradually dimmed. Hanwu's heart felt at ease, and at the same time, he was also full of expectations. Since Yunjiang left, he had been in a daze, like a rootless duckweed, and now the people from the sect were finally coming. He was no longer alone. A few years was not a long time for a cultivator. Just sitting and watching would pass by. However, he was anxious every day. Later, he realized that this was not good for his cultivation, so he calmed his mind and focused on cultivation. Unknowingly, he entered a state of meditation for a long time. When he woke up, he looked at the water leak and calculated that a whole 3 years had passed. Thinking that the cloud whale outside didn't see him, he was afraid that it would make a move. Just when he was about to get up, he heard a voice saying, You are awake. He couldn't help but be shocked. Rays of light rose from his body, and at the same time, his entire person became faintly discernible. At this time, he looked up and saw a gloomy Taoist standing there. It was the person he saw in the dual realm dial. He was startled, but then he relaxed. Although he didn't know how the other party came in the end, he didn't harm him, and now was not the time to care about these things. He got up and said, Greetings, Mr. Sima. Sima Quan looked at him and said, Looking at the qi on your body, it's indeed the 9-continent style, and you've even introduced the demonic bloodline. You've actually managed to draw out your original divine ability. Hanwu said, I have embarrassed myself in front of you. Sima Quan said, It's just that you didn't have a master to teach you for the past few decades, and your blood is not compatible. It's fine now with the qi training method, it's enough to suppress it, but if you want to go forward, it will be difficult. Hanwu's heart moved and he said, Mister, please guide me. Sima Quan said, Logically speaking, there are many capable people in your sect, it's not my turn to guide you, but you still have some room to move forward. If you miss it, it will be a pity. He stretched out his finger, and a spiritual light shot out, flying into Hanwu's eyebrows, and said, This is a method to fuse qi and blood. It won't improve your cultivation by much, but it will allow you to control your divine power more freely. Hanwu didn't have time to look at it and only said, Thank you, mister. Sima Quan shook his head and said, This is nothing as long as Spiritual Master Wei doesn't blame me for being meddlesome in the future. Hanwu was confused. Is this Spiritual Master Wei a master in my sect? Sima Quan said with a smile, Looks like your master didn't tell you anything. He's also very cautious, afraid of harming you. This Spiritual Master Wei is your master. Hanwu's expression became serious and he said, So it's master. He then asked curiously, What does this disciple's sect look like? How many masters do I have? Sima Quan said in a deep voice, Your Xinyuan branch is very impressive. When I came out, there was another spiritual master who ascended to the position of Heavenly Cave, but I don't need to tell you this. When you find Yunjiang, or when you return to the sect in the future, you will understand. Hanwu didn't really understand, so he didn't ask anymore. Sima Quan said, This time, I came back to find your master Yunjiang. Before the matter is completed, you still have to wait here for a while. Hanwu said, Yes, mister. At this time he thought of the big whale outside and said, "There is a demon whale in the lake outside the cave. It was Master who ordered me to ask it some questions, but it still refused to answer." Sima Quan sneered, "This cloud whale sure has a lot of thoughts, but I already know what it knows. Now that I have already let it sleep, there is no need to pay too much attention to it." Hanwu didn't like this demon whale, so when he heard what Sima Quan said, he was happy to ignore it. Sima Quan said a few more words, then left the cave, and then took out a glass bottle. There was a drop of Yun Zhang's blood essence in it. It was deliberately left in the sect before he went to Jiaohua Jie. In case something went wrong, someone later could use this to find him. He sensed for a while, and because Yun Jiang had left behind many methods on the road, it was very easy to find the path that the latter had taken in the past, and followed the clues until he came to the sky. He could faintly feel that there seemed to be a door between two worlds in front of him, so he tried to take a look. He believed that he could pass through it, but he had to guard against any arrangements on the other side. The best way was to wait for it to open itself, then possess someone, and then mix in. After coming to this world, he had already sent his doppelgangers to take a look around the various countries, and he knew that there was actually a connection between the two worlds, so there were a few ways to lure the people from Yunshu Jie down. He immediately ordered his doppelgangers to do it, and then he waited patiently. After waiting for about 20 days, he felt the spiritual vigor in the realm gate surge, then a whirlpool appeared in the sky, and a person walked out from it. Chapter 1469. The person who came out did not wear a crown, and there was only a jade hairpin in his hair bun. He wore a black robe, and although he looked ordinary on the outside, he hid his emotions well. His long beard and hair were combed neatly and meticulously, and he looked like a very well-behaved person. Sima Quan saw that this person had Yuanian cultivation and was worthy of him possessing, so he separated a strand of demonic thought and subtly changed his mind and mind. This person investigated the various countries in the Hornflower boundary and found out that the rumors in the lower bound were just groundless rumors. He was not willing to stay any longer, so he returned to the upper bound. When Sima Quan saw him coming, he immediately possessed him. This time, he did not possess his main body, but only a clone. No one knew what mysteries there were in the realm gate, and what kind of almighty being was hiding behind it. If he was discovered, even if something happened to the clone, it would not affect the main body. That person did not sense anything. He took out a talisman, turned it into spiritual light to cover himself, and stepped into the realm gate. Sima Quan waited patiently on the spot. He could not sense across worlds, so if his clone could pass through, he would naturally try to trick that person to come back. If it did not work, then it would mean that he had failed. He waited here for several months, but there was no movement on the other side of the realm gate. His expression unconsciously became cautious. It was clear that the other side was heavily guarded, and it looked like they had experience in resisting heavenly demons like him. It was impossible to enter using normal methods, so he had to use other methods. After thinking for a while, he took out a bronze mask very solemnly. The eyes of this item were hollow, but there was a sinister and strange smile on it. This was an item left behind by ancestor Lingyu, and only those who had cultivated the true spirit communication technique could use it. When he went to the Junshin realm back then, Yuan Hongyang had specially given it to him, but he had never used it against an enemy. The reason for this was because he was afraid, and also because he did not know what this treasure was used for. After so many years of research, he had a slight understanding of it. This mask could be used to hide one's body, and it could also be used to conceal the things on one's body. As long as it was not taken off, it would be difficult for anyone or anything to discover it. However, he only used it for 100 breaths each time, and then he did not dare to go any deeper. Otherwise, no one knew what would happen. He took the item and put it on his face. Then the mask disappeared, as if it had become one with him. He did not dare to delay, and his body swayed, and he passed through the realm gate. If he was discovered this time, then he would have no other way. His main body was damaged, so he could only rely on the clone he left in the Hornflower boundary to slowly recover. Fortunately, such a situation did not occur, and he passed through the realm gate without a hitch. He took a step forward, and was the first to feel a strong spirit, but that was only relative to the Hornflower boundary. It could not compare to the mountain and sea realms or the Junshin realms. Next, his attention was attracted by the bronze statues of strange beasts on either side of the hall. He could clearly sense that they were all living creatures made of flesh and blood, and that they had been shaped by special methods before being placed here. There were also annotations below these beasts, which specifically stated what kind of monsters they were, what kind of divine abilities they had, and what year, month, and day they had died to. If they were placed in the mountain and sea realm, these beasts would all be demon sages. There were at least 100 bronze statues here, which was a shocking number. He glanced over them and committed them all to memory. Looking up, he saw a Taoist sitting cross-legged in a ball of golden light, reading a book. From time to time, he would stop to circulate his cultivation technique, as if he was comprehending something. He was most likely the guardian of this place, but this person was completely unaware of his arrival and was still wholeheartedly focused on his cultivation. This person could not be blamed for being careless. There were powerful restrictive spells on the realm gate, and since it had been set up, there had never been any mistakes. Furthermore, no one had been to the Hornflower boundary recently, so it was not worth paying attention to. Sima Quan thought about it for a moment and decided not to possess this person. He was afraid that there might be some powerful restrictive spells in the hall, so he did not dare to stay here for long. He flew out as fast as he could. After leaving the hall, he walked some distance before stopping. He carefully took off his mask, and if he felt that something was wrong, he would put it back on. After waiting for a while, he saw that there was nothing out of the ordinary and knew that he had evaded detection. Only then did he relax and look around. Just now, the hall that he had come out of was built on a tall mountain. There was a flat stone platform on the outside, and it was all made of fine white snow jade. There was a staircase that extended downwards, and each level was very wide. Even huge beasts could pass through. In the distance, he could see the undulating mountain range. Under the clear blue sky, he could see that the peak was covered in white snow. Among them, there was a huge peak that was especially majestic, and it stood out from the rest of the mountain. There were layers of golden light around it, and a holy and solemn aura surged towards him. However, when he looked at this mountain, he had a strange feeling. It was as if this thing was not here, but somewhere extremely far away. However, due to the guidance of something, he could see it. He could not help but think to himself, this world is indeed not simple. At this time, he tried to sense it again, but he did not find any traces of the existence of his clone. It was destroyed the instant he passed through. He was secretly on guard. This place seemed to be even more dangerous than the Junshin world. However, since he was already here, the situation was different. As long as he planted the demonic chi in this world and spread it throughout the world, it would be very difficult for the other party to do anything to him. There was a large city at the bottom of this mountain. Looking at its scale, it was at least 100,000 miles wide. It was very large, and there were pavilions everywhere. There were palaces and temples everywhere. Clouds floated in the sky, and spiritual beasts flew across the sky. There were restrictive formations connecting the inside and outside of the city, and the scenery formed a whole. Looking at it from the outside, it was as if the clouds were makeup and the sun and moon were a painting. Sima Quan floated down and used more than 10 days to go around this place. He planted countless demonic chi, but before he completely understood the details of this world, he did not want to activate it. Through this round of investigation, he already knew that this place was called Chinjue City, and it was one of the 100 cities under the Great Might Heavenly Palace. Most of the people here were cultivators, and there were also billions of mortals. However, they were all servants and were not valued. Their status was even lower than some demonic beasts. The cultivation method of this world was also the path of chi, and because it was also inherited, the network was very clear. It was similar to the 9 continents in general, and only the details were slightly different. However, what was different was that the cultivation of the cultivators here was ordinary, and most of them had stopped at the core transformation realm. Instead, the guardian of the Great Hall on the cliff had the highest cultivation, and he was also the only one. Moreover, the people here, regardless of whether they were immortals or mortals, all advocated extravagance. They feasted, played, and indulged in sensual pleasures. It was as if they cultivated just to have a longer lifespan to pursue pleasure. Sima Quan looked through the mental memories of these people, but found that he could not trace them to the cultivators of a higher level. It was obvious that the great might heavenly palace great divinities were not close to these people, and he could not find out anything from them. The only person who could possibly know the situation was the cultivator who guarded the great hall. However, before he knew what was going on, he did not plan to look for this person. Since he had successfully arrived in this world, he needed to report to the inner world. He immediately turned into an invisible body and left the city. Then, he went deep underground and opened up a cave abode. Then, he took out the dual realm dial, but when he reached out to press it, he found that there was no movement. He took out the sky dial and it was the same. He was a little surprised, and after careful inspection he found that it was not that the Dharma treasure was damaged, but that there was an aura of unknown origin that was suppressing it. He laughed coldly. If this place did not work, he would go to the sky. However, he did not believe that this kind of aura could fill the void. If it really did reach that step, then this kind of method had already surpassed the scope of his understanding. It was better to leave as soon as possible, and there was no need to stay here any longer. However, the people of this world not only had methods to guard against heavenly demons, but they had also further eliminated the dual realm dial and the sky dial. This meant that they were very vigilant against the people who had infiltrated from beyond the sky. Yun Jiang once said that the people of this world seemed to have a great enemy. It seems that it was true. Otherwise, it would not be so heavily guarded. He looked up into the sky. It seems that there might be other arrangements above void sky. I must be careful when I come down. After putting away the two items, he returned to the surface. Just as he was about to go to the sky, he noticed a large group of people passing by in the distance, and he subconsciously paid attention to them. This group of people were all women. Their white lotus-like arms were exposed, but their faces were covered with a thin veil. In their hands, they were holding large glazed lamps, on which a beautiful flower was planted. As they walked, there were even people sprinkling flower petals and fragrant dew. At the center of the group were a few tens of monsters that were shaped like enormous elephants. The most majestic amongst them had a large canopy on its back, and numerous necklaces hung down from it while its veil swayed slightly. A graceful woman sat within the canopy. However, her figure was hazy like a silhouette, yet it just so happened to cause others to feel that every single move she made was capable of captivating one's soul. Everywhere she went, a large group of people would kneel down and kowtow while calling out, "Goddess." Their voices converged together and resounded through the sky. As a heavenly demon, Sima Quan naturally could not feel these things. However, he could delve deep into his spirit and see the desires of people. He could tell that these people were extremely fanatical, as if their minds had been bewitched. At this moment in the sky, two Taoists stood there, looking at the group of women. They seemed to be monitoring them. The person in the lead revealed a look of disgust and said, "I don't know what the elders in the palace are thinking. Why did they let the people of the Fairy Mountain come to the territory of the Great Might Heavenly Palace? Is it not enough that they have harmed the 5 mountains and 3 cities? Do they want to make my territory a mess as well?" The other person beside him said, "It is said that Elder Feng asked for a favor from the Fairy Mountain last time, and promised that the Fairy Mountain could move freely under the jurisdiction of the Chenjue city. I don't know if it is true or not." The person in the lead smiled disdainfully and said, "Elder Feng has been in seclusion ever since the battle with the ominous demon from the outer heavens. It is rumored that he has long lost his magic power. Now, all kinds of dirty water are splashed on him. It is obvious that someone is eyeing the position of the elder." Sima Quan was not far away, and he also heard the conversation between the two people. He thought to himself, "These two people seem to know a lot of information. Maybe I can use them to open a gap, and there is no need to look for the cultivator on the cliff." With this thought, he flew into the sky, and a gust of chilly wind swept past the two people. To be continued. Chapter 1470. Genius in 1 second. Remember net, providing you with exciting novels to read. Sima Quan's attack immediately latched onto the bodies of the two Taoists, but the two of them had no idea that they had fallen into a trap. He immediately flipped through the two's memories, but he did not delve too deep, or else his mind would inevitably be affected. He still had use for the two of them, but if the powerful people behind them saw through him, it would not be beneficial for him to come down and take action. After looking through them, he had a general idea of the situation in the Junshu realm. This place was similar to the mountain and sea realm, with no end in sight. There were more than 100 powers in this realm, with 12 of them being the largest. The Great Might Heavenly Palace was only one of the larger powers. These 7 powers jointly controlled dozens of lower realms, and the number of lower realms they controlled determined the power of each power. As for why the realm gate was only guarded by Yuanian cultivators, that was because the people with profound cultivation bases had all gone to a severed realm where demons and devils roamed. They were also prepared to deal with any invading monsters from beyond the heavens. He looked into what a severed realm was, and understood that the people of the Junshu realm were not natives of this place. After they arrived, because of the demons and devils, they used some sort of method to sever the space between the realm gate and the original demons and Taoist cultivators. However, the two sides belonged to the same realm, so it was impossible to completely cut off contact. Therefore, the almighty beings stood guard at the gate all year round. Sima Quan's mind raced. If there was such a method, then it meant that there were almighty beings in this realm. So why was the spiritual opportunity here so weak? The two of them could not find an answer in their memories, but based on the clues they had left behind, he could deduce that it was similar to the severed realm. The people here had used some sort of method to divide the spiritual opportunity in the realm into strong and weak, so that those at the top lived in prosperity and those at the bottom lived in decline. The benefits of such a method were obvious. Not only could one maximize the use of spiritual opportunity, but those who were ambitious would also have to constantly climb up the ladder. If possible, the mountain and sea realm could do the same thing. However, the prerequisite was that they had to be able to do so. If they used ordinary methods to do such a thing, it would consume a lot of spiritual opportunity, and they would also have to find a way to maintain it. In fact, they would suffer even more losses, and the gains would outweigh the losses. Whether it was the boundary severing technique or the spiritual opportunity division technique, these two things were very good. At the very least, the 9 regions were unable to do it. It was very likely that there really was a powerful existence, but it was also possible that, as the people of the 9 regions had deduced, the people of this world had a powerful magical tool to rely on. He thought that the latter was more likely, because with such a powerful being in charge, few forces would dare to invade, and there was no need for them to act as if they were facing a great enemy. However, if the enemy also had a powerful being of the same level, then it would be a different story. In short, everything remained to be seen. He continued to flip through the pages and found that there was nothing useful in their minds. After all, their cultivation bases weren't very high, and they weren't members of the upper echelons of the Great Might Heavenly Palace, nor were they direct bloodline successors. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been sent here to manage things. Now that he had a good understanding of the situation, he retracted his thoughts and flew up into the void, preparing to use the 2-realm dial to inform the mountain and sea realm of the situation. Just now that he was at the top of the heavens, he suddenly realized that something was off. His heart was pounding, as if he were being watched by something. Reacting quickly, he put on the bronze mask and then descended to the ground. Almost in the same moment that he put on the mask, a beam of light swept over him. In the middle of the void was a large crystalline mirror. It was not flat, but rather perfectly round. Several dozen women sat cross-legged on top of it, all of them facing different directions. In one of the seats, a horned woman suddenly let out a cry of surprise and looked down. In the seat of honor was a white-robed woman who looked a bit older than she was. She walked over and asked, "Junior Sister Song, did you notice something?" Junior Sister Song replied, "Junior Sister Song, I saw ripples on the mirror, as if something strange had happened. However, when I looked again, nothing happened." The white-robed woman was very cautious. She walked over to her seat and looked over the mirror several times, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. She refused to believe that her fellow sect member had made a mistake, so she knew that something was off. Frowning, she said, "Keep an eye on it and don't be careless. If anything happens, call me immediately." Junior sister's song didn't dare to be careless. Her duties were very important, and were designed to guard against the vicious creatures from beyond the heavens. If one of them really did enter, it would be a huge calamity. "I'll keep an eye on it," she said earnestly. The white-robed woman still didn't feel at ease. After a moment of hesitation, she returned to her seat of honor, where a veiled woman appeared. She clasped hands respectfully and said, "Pavilion Elder Yun, see Jingyinkong offers greetings." Pavilion Elder Yun's figure was twice the size of an ordinary person. She looked down from above and asked, "What's the matter?" The white-robed woman said, "Pavilion Elder Yun, just now, there was a strange movement on the spirit mirror. However, when I looked for it again, it disappeared. That's why I came to report." Pavilion Elder Yun's expression instantly became very solemn. "Where did it appear?" The white-robed woman said, "From the looks of it, it should be above the Great Might Heavenly Palace's domain." Pavilion Elder Yun said, "The spirit mirror has never been wrong. Don't be careless and search diligently. It's fine even if you have to make a big move. I will personally explain to the Great Might Heavenly Palace." The white-robed woman clasped hands and said, "This disciple understands." Pavilion Elder Yun raised her palm and clasped hands again, covering that layer of fog again. She turned around and walked into a secret chamber. There was a sage-like Daoran sitting here. Seeing her enter, he chuckled and said, "Pavilion Elder Yun, have you encountered some trouble?" Pavilion Elder Yun glanced at him. "There's a strange movement in the spirit mirror." Doran's smile immediately vanished. His expression also became solemn. "A demon has infiltrated." Pavilion Elder Yun said, "That should be the case. The spirit mirror has never been wrong. However, he still managed to escape." Daoran was even more surprised. He said, "The spirit mirror has never been found. The demon that has come this time is not ordinary. Pavilion Elder, are you going to invite all the sects here for a discussion?" Pavilion Elder Yun said indifferently, "Of course. Doesn't City Lord Chen know the consequences of not getting rid of the demon that has entered the realm? What's more, with just the two of us, we won't be able to find the other sects' domains." Daoran frowned and said, "Then are we going to postpone our discussion?" Pavilion Elder Yun said, "City Lord Chen, you don't have to worry about anything. As long as that demon spirituality doesn't disappear, there will always be opportunities that appear even if we don't deliberately look for it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be dozens of lower realms for me to command now." Daoran shook his head and said, "Although there are many lower realms, if we don't take the initiative to plan, how many of them will fall into our hands? Pavilion Elder Yun should know that the expansion of the outer realms has always been the time when the authorities in our realm rearrange themselves. Don't you want to strengthen the spirit mirror region?" Pavilion Elder Yun, however, was not moved at all. She said with a cold expression, "In front of the demon, these are all secondary matters." Daoran didn't try to persuade her anymore. He stood up and said, "If Pavilion Elder Yun changes your mind, you can come and find me anytime." He paused and said, "I will order people to thoroughly investigate the matter of that demon. Farewell." Sima Quan landed, and when there was no longer anyone spying on him, he took off his mask and thought, "There are actually monitors in the sky, and the security is very tight. I'll have to find another way to communicate to the inner realm." If it really didn't work, he still had another way. He would retreat to the Hornflower realm and then do this. There wouldn't be any obstacles, and with the bronze mask, he wouldn't have to worry about anyone noticing. However, he didn't act immediately. Because of the restriction, going there might cause some accidents. He took out the jade bottle with Yun Jiang's blood essence from his sleeve and prepared to try to find its whereabouts. Yun Jiang came dozens of years earlier than him. If she was still alive, then she should know more about this realm than him, so he could try to make contact with her first. After a moment, he felt a weak sensation. His eyes flickered. Yun Jiang was indeed still alive. It was probably because of the various monitors that she couldn't communicate with the inner realm. He was experienced, so he didn't go look for her immediately. Instead, he sent out a few avatars to different realms and circled around. Finally, he put on the bronze mask again to cover his tracks. This way, even if someone came to track him, they wouldn't be able to find him. 1 month later, he arrived before a temple that stood on top of a waterfall. This place was very desolate, and from the two memories, it was also under the jurisdiction of the Great Might Heavenly Palace. The master of the palace was a Yuanying elder named Wang Weidao. He could sense that Yun Jiang was deep inside the temple, but he wasn't in a rush to meet her. After thinking for a bit, he turned into a gust of cold wind and flew toward the main palace. Hall Master Wang Weidao was sitting cross-legged on the bed. However, his face was old and frail, and his complexion was not good. His body was also dim, as if he was suffering from a serious illness. Zhan Moping and a dozen or so disciples were standing respectfully before the couch. Wang Weidao said in a heavy voice, "Last time, Elder Feng and I fought against the demon from outer space, so we were poisoned. After so many years, it's time to give up this broken body. After I leave, my eldest disciple, Zhou Cheng, can inherit my Dao and become the Cliff Master of Bian Cliff." This was something that had been decided a long time ago, and today was just a formality. No one was surprised and they all bowed in agreement. After giving some instructions, he dismissed all the disciples and only left Zhan Moping behind. He said, "Moping, you are my relative, so I hope you won't blame me for not giving you the position of Cliff Master." Zhan Moping said, "Eldest senior brother has the highest cultivation among us. Disciple knows his own limits and wouldn't dare to have such thoughts." Wang Weidao sighed and said, "After Master left, I was worried you would be harmed by Hongzhi. That person is narrow-minded and will take revenge for the smallest grievance. You offended him back then, and he has been targeting Master ever since." Zhan Moping said shamefully, "It's all Disciple's fault, Master. Back then, when they came up from Jiaohua boundary, Elder Hong wanted to capture Yun Jiang, but he suffered a great loss in the latter's hands. Afterward, Wang Weidao rushed over after hearing the news. Elder Hong wasn't able to do anything to Zhan Moping and the rest, but the enmity was formed. Although there were no movements in these years, with this person's personality, he would definitely come for revenge once Wang Weidao left. Wang Weidao coughed twice and took out a talisman. He said, "I have already arranged it for you. This is the token to go to Pingshan boundary. You and Weining will go there together. Hongzhi is the guardian elder, so he won't be able to chase you there. Although there are many demons in this boundary, the spirit opportunity is not inferior to my cave abode. If you can cultivate to the Yuanying realm there and come back, you won't have to be afraid of him." Chapter 1471. While the people in the palace were talking, Sima Quan followed his senses and found a lake. As Zhan Moping's companion in name, Yun Jiang usually stayed with him. However, Wang Weidao had something to ask of him, so he could not go with him. He was currently entrenched in this large lake. At this moment, he suddenly heard a voice in his mind, "Are you Jinren Yun?" Yun Jiang felt a strange voice in his mind and asked cautiously, "Who are you?" Sima Quan replied, "Nether Spring Sect, Sima Quan." Yun Jiang was shocked at first, then delighted, "Is it Jinren Sima?" Before he came to Jiahua boundary, he heard Wei Zihong talk about Sima Quan. He knew that this person had the body of a sky demon. With enough time, he could single-handedly wreak havoc in a boundary. Sima Quan said, "Jinren Yun has not communicated with the inner boundary for years, so the great Jinren sent me here to inquire about this boundary." Yun Jiang sighed, "The two-realm dial is in my disciple's hands, and there are eyes and ears everywhere. I can't find a chance to leave. Fortunately, Jinren Sima is here. Otherwise, I would still be thinking of how to send a message back." Sima Quan said, "I have already seen Jinren Yun's disciple. He is doing well." Yun Jiang was happy to hear this news. He said, "Thank you, Jinren Sima, for informing me." Sima Quan asked, "Why is Jinren Yun here?" Yun Jiang told him how he snuck into this boundary. After listening, Sima Quan praised, Zhenren Yun risked his life, he is a brave man. Yun Jiang said, I am ashamed that I am not capable enough. If I did not do this, it would be difficult for me to enter this boundary. Sima Quan said, I have only been here for a short time, so my understanding of the boundary is superficial. Zhenren Yun has been in Yunshu boundary for many years. Have you heard any valuable information? Yun Jiang said, I know a little. Yunshu boundary is divided into 4 grades: purple, green, white, and red. The purple grade is the most expensive. I heard that it is a place where ritual implements and various sex grandmasters are worshipped. The green grade is occupied by the great mediums. The white grade is where I am now. The last grade is the red grade. It is filled with demons and is the most chaotic. They often charge into the green grade to fight the great mediums. Sima Quan asked, this realm-severing technique is quite impressive. Do you know what method they used? Yun Jiang said, I've tried to find out more about it, but to no avail. Most people in the white world don't know about this. If I want to know more, I'm afraid I have to go to the Azure world. Sima Quan thought to himself, looks like I have to think of a way to go to the Azure world. Yun Jiang said, below Yunshu realm are the dozens of lower realms, but I heard that the spiritual vigor is thin, most of them are not as good as Jiahua realm. Sima Quan said, since it's not even as good as the Hornflower realm, what's the use of invading it? Perhaps it wasn't like this in the beginning, and it only changed after it was occupied by the people of Yunshu realm. Yun Jiang said, what Zhenren Sima said makes sense. In my humble opinion, they conquered other realms and built the Gate of the Two Realms in order to plunder the lower realm Spiritium and use it to support the upper realm, just like the world severance. Sima Quan did not speak. In his heart, he agreed with this judgment. As for whether or not this was the case, he could go to the Azure world to verify it. He said, I heard that Yunshu realm was invaded by a fierce demon from beyond the heavens. Does fellow Taoist know what kind of demon it is? Yun Jiang said, I've never seen it before, but there are layers upon layers of obstacles in this realm. Presumably, even if this demon entered this realm, it would be immediately discovered by those mighty people, and it would not be able to really cause trouble. I've been here for many years, and I don't dare to act rashly. Even when I knock on the side, I'm extremely careful, afraid that I'll accidentally expose myself. Sima Quan grunted. He had a deep understanding of this. At this moment, a conveyance light flew over, and Sima Quan's voice immediately disappeared. Just now, Yun Jiang had not seen him, and he did not know where he had gone. But thinking about it, only someone with this kind of ability could come and go freely in the lower realm. The conveyance light landed on the ground and suddenly dispersed. Zhan Moping walked out of it, walked to the side of the lake, and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Zhan Mang, I have something to discuss with you. Yun Jiang poked his head out of the water and said, what is it? Zhan Moping said in a deep voice, in a few days I'll be going to Pingshan realm with junior sister Su. That place is filled with demons, and I'm afraid that my senior brother won't be able to handle it without the two of us. I'll need fellow Taoists' help. Yun Jiang said, I'm your companion, so I'll follow you wherever you go. But why are you going to another realm out of nowhere? Did you offend someone? Zhan Moping sighed, fellow Taoist, do you still remember that Elder Hong who wanted to capture you when you first came to this realm? Yun Jiang said, of course I remember. Not only did he remember, but he remembered it very clearly. At that time, that Hall Guardian Elder wanted to capture him, and he hesitated. Perhaps working under an elder would allow him to obtain more information. But in the end he decided not to obey. This was because he understood Zhan Moping's temperament, and Zhan Moping still respected him. If it was an unfamiliar Yuanying elder, Zhan Moping might not be so easy to deal with. Therefore, Yun Jiang gave Zhan Moping a fierce counterattack, and he still remembered Zhan Moping's cold eyes when he left. Zhan Moping said, this person doesn't have any magnanimity, and he's been causing trouble for teacher all these years. Now that teacher is going to give up his body and reincarnate, this person will definitely come looking for us. This time, We're really going to hide in Pingshan realm to avoid trouble. Yun Jiang said, if that's the case, it's not a bad choice. When do we leave? Zhan Moping said, the sooner the better. Teacher's injuries are no longer a secret, and Elder Hong might be paying attention to this place right now. Once teacher leaves, I'm afraid he'll come looking for us immediately. Before Yun Jiang could speak, Sima Quan's voice sounded in his mind. Spiritual Master Yun, this is an opportunity. This realm is filled with restrictive passes, and I can't use the dual realm dial. Why don't I go with fellow Taoists to Pingshan realm and inform the sect of this matter? Afterward, I'll bring the dial back, and if I need to use it in the future, I'll be able to go down to the lower realm. This way, I won't have to destroy this instrument when crossing the realm pass. Yun Jiang pondered for a moment and felt that this was a good idea, so he said, I don't have any problems here. Then, Taoist Zhan, set a date and I'll go with you. Zhan Moping was happy to see that things were going smoothly. He cupped his hands and said, please wait here, Taoist Zhan. I'll make the arrangements immediately, and once it's done, I'll call for you. With that, he soared into a conveyance light and hurried back to make preparations. Perhaps he knew that this trip couldn't be delayed, but the arrangements were almost completed in half a day. It was just that Su Weiniang had to pack a lot of things, so it took some time. On the second day, he hurried over to summon Yun Jiang, and they rode the brocade cloud in the direction of Pingshan realm. It was 10 days' journey, and Sima Quan reminded Yun Jiang in his mind, someone is waiting in front, and from the looks of it, they're coming for you. Yun Jiang didn't dare to underestimate them and immediately told Zhan Moping about it. When the latter heard this, he said with a trace of hope, perhaps it has nothing to do with us? Yun Jiang said, we can give it a try. Taoist, if you take a detour, they'll definitely follow us if they come for us. Zhan Moping didn't dare to be careless and immediately changed his direction. However, after a few breaths, he saw 2 conveyances flying out from the valley in front of them, and they were heading towards them aggressively. Zhan Moping's heart skipped a beat, and he gritted his teeth. They must be people sent by Elder Hong. This is Mountain Range C, and even if someone is killed here, no one will know if it's not investigated. Su Weiniang's face paled. How did they know we were going to leave from here? Zhan Moping's expression was a little gloomy. It wasn't hard for him to guess that someone in the sect had betrayed them, but he couldn't guess who it was, and he didn't want to guess. He took a deep breath and asked, Taoist Yun, can you deal with these people? Yun Jiang replied, 2 Yuanian cultivators, but I can't fight them head-on. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Without using his Dharma treasures, a strength Tao cultivator like him was indeed no match for 2 people of the same generation. Zhan Moping exclaimed, 2 Yuanian cultivators? They're definitely not from the Great Might Heavenly Palace. Apart from the 12 major powers in Yunshu realm, there were also many Yuanian cultivators among the hundreds of smaller powers. Most of them couldn't go to Azure World, so they weren't weak either. As long as Elder Hong was willing to pay a certain price, he could indeed invite a few of them. Su Weiniang trembled in fear and said anxiously, Senior brother, they're about to catch up. Hurry up and think of something. Zhan Moping couldn't think of anything and could only urge Jin Yun to fly away. However, the 2 people behind them were much faster than them. It seemed like they would catch up in another 10 breaths. Yun Jiang thought about it. If the 2 people died, it wouldn't be convenient for him to come down and do what he wanted. He said, Taoist friend, you 2 go first. I'll stop them. Zhan Moping didn't hesitate. He knew that it was useless for him to stay. He said solemnly, take care, Taoist friend. My senior brother and junior sister will wait at the realm pass. Yun Jiang responded and turned around. With a loud roar, he revealed his true form and turned into a demon whale that was as large as a mountain, blocking the way. At the same time, a dragging force appeared around his body. His original form was extremely huge, and the power he displayed was also extremely great. The 2 people who were chasing after him were immediately dragged by him. Although he couldn't win against the 2 of them, he relied on his body of strength. Before his dermic powers were exhausted, it was impossible for them to kill him. Moreover, Sima Quan was beside him. They couldn't let anything happen to him. The two Yuanian cultivators thought that it would be easy to get rid of him. However, every time they tried to do so, they would always be held back by an inexplicable dermic power at the crucial moment. They were actually entangled here for more than 2 hours. The battle between the three of them caused quite a commotion. After all, this was the territory of the Great Way Heavenly Palace. The two Yuanian cultivators guessed that the patrollers had already arrived. They didn't dare to stay for long. Seeing that there was no chance, they found an opportunity to leave. Yun Jiang didn't stop them. He turned around and chased after Zhan Moping and Zhan Moping. In less than an hour, he met up with the two. Because he was afraid that Elder Hong might have other arrangements, he didn't stop. After another 3 days, he finally arrived at the realm gate of the Pingshan realm. Zhan Moping took out the talisman and handed it to the guardian elder for inspection. However, the elder said coldly, "You two will have to stay for a few more days. Recently, we received a decree from the Azure world. Anyone who wants to cross the realm must be examined with a spirit mirror. Only those who are not possessed by demons can pass. Before this, no one is allowed to leave. Otherwise, they will be treated as demons." Chapter 1472. Zhan Moping and the others did not want to argue with the guardian elder, so they brought Su Wenying and Yun Jiang to the side hall. However, they found that there was already someone waiting there. They went up to talk to that person who, like them, was also from one of the 12 powers. Due to the same reason, they were temporarily trapped here. Yun Jiang asked telepathically, "Fellow Taoist Zhan, could this be Elder Hong's trick?" Zhan Moping was no longer flustered. He looked outside and saw that no one was watching them. He replied telepathically, "Fellow Taoist Zhan Mang, don't worry. Every guardian cultivator has nothing to do with each other. Elder Hong's reach is not that far. Also, there is a Guanbi in the hall. Anything that happens will be seen by the perfected ones in the Azure world. There are so many people here, no one would dare to be so presumptuous." Sima Quan had been following beside the three. He pondered for a while. To be able to give such a command in the realm guarding hall, that person should be from the Azure world. He did not know if they were here to look for him or to search for demons. However, he had the bronze mask passed down by ancestral master Lingyu. He was confident that he could avoid detection, so there was no need to panic. They stayed here for 2 days. After Zhan Moping, a few more people entered the side hall. It seemed that they were all heading to Pingshan realm to kill demons. However, Sima Quan noticed a frail-looking youth dressed in a gray robe. This person gave him a strange feeling. He said, "Perfected Yun, there is something strange about that person in the gray robe. We need to be careful later." Yun Jiang replied, "Thank you, Perfected Yun, for the reminder." He did not tell Zhan Moping about this. If the latter found out, he would inevitably reveal a flaw. If he attracted this person's attention, it would be self-defeating. 1 day later, a magnificent pillar of light descended from outside the hall, and 3 people walked out. Judging from their aura, each of them had cultivated a nascent soul dharma body. The one in the lead was a middle-aged Taoist with a stocky and heavy body. The guardian elder came forward and bowed. "By long welcomes the messenger of the Azure world. Please come in." The middle-aged Taoist nodded at him and entered the main hall. He looked around at the bronze statues by the side of the platform and said sternly, "There is no need for pleasantries. Summon everyone here." The guardian elder gave an order, and a palace attendant entered and called out everyone, including Zhan Moping. He said, "Envoy, everyone is here." The middle-aged Taoist looked around and raised his hand. The 2 people behind him lit up a joss stick. Not long after, a strange aroma spread in all directions. At the same time, a cloud of mist surged out. Not long after, it spread to the entire hall. Everyone instantly felt as if their bodies had fallen into a sticky swamp, and because they didn't know what these envoys wanted to do, they became slightly uneasy. The middle-aged Taoist said in a calm voice, "Don't panic. This cloud won't hurt anyone. It's just to prevent demons from sneaking in and hurting people." Only then did everyone relax a little. The middle-aged Taoist took out a mirror and shone it at the crowd. No expression could be seen on his face. After a moment, his gaze landed on a cultivator and he asked, "Where do you cultivate?" That cultivator didn't know what to do. He answered while trembling, "I am a disciple of Five Color Mountain, Qiuguang. I cultivate under Elder Wu." The middle-aged Taoist said, "You can leave first, but you still need to train your courage. Otherwise, how will you subdue demons in Pingshinjie?" The guardian elder waved his hand and had the palace attendant make way for them. He said, "Let's go." Seeing that he was fine, that cultivator was overjoyed. He bowed to the middle-aged Taoist and guardian elder, then hurriedly left the side hall and stepped into the realm gate above. This place gave him a lot of pressure. He would rather face demons than stay here any longer. The middle-aged Taoist came down and said to another person, "You can leave too." That person also hurriedly left the hall as if he had received an imperial edict. As everyone left, there were fewer and fewer people left in the main hall. Soon, only the handsome youth and Zhang Mo Ping's group were left. The middle-aged Taoist looked at the handsome youth. His two companions behind him seemed to know what he wanted, so they walked up and surrounded him. The handsome youth was startled. "Envoy, what is the meaning of this?" The middle-aged Taoist said, "Just surrender. Do you still want to hide before my mirror shines?" The handsome youth was even more confused. At the same time, he was a little angry. He said, Why do you say that?" The middle-aged Taoist did not waste any more words with him. He said, "Do you think I'm just bluffing? You're just a light monster. Who gave you the guts to be here?" He waved his hand and ordered, "Capture him." As he shouted, several spiritual rings flew out from him and his two companions, trapping the handsome youth tightly. The latter did not resist at all. Instead, he looked at the wronged expression he had just now and revealed an expression of surprise. He said, "I have never revealed any flaws. How did you see through me?" The middle-aged Taoist did not answer. He nodded to his two companions and made a hand seal at the same time. Wind and fire appeared on the ground. It started burning from the feet of the handsome youth and quickly spread to his body. Seeing this, the middle-aged Taoist did not relax at all. He stared at the fire. They knew that a monster from the outer world would not only have this little ability. The guardian elder held the talisman in his hand tightly. The bronze statues in the main hall were not just for show. In times of crisis, they could also be used to fight the enemy. The handsome youth was quickly burned until only his head was left. However, he did not die. He sneered. "Very good. Today, you destroyed one of my avatars. I'll owe you for now. In the future, when my clan enters the outer world, I'll personally get it back from you." The moment he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. The fire rose several feet high and the last bit of the person disappeared in the fire. The middle-aged Taoist was not happy. Instead, he revealed a look of worry. He ordered the people beside him, "The light monster has appeared. Do not underestimate it. Go and report this to the Azure world." Sima Quan looked at the charred area on the ground and became vigilant. He thought to himself, "So they really came for the demon from the outer world. I have never seen these evil creatures before. Since they can invade the Yunshu realm, they can also invade other realms. I need to report this to the inner world." The middle-aged Taoist turned around and looked at Zhang Moping and the others. He said in a low voice, "Now it's your turn." Zhang Moping was very frightened. He bowed and said, "Emissary, please allow me to report. We are not demons." The middle-aged Taoist said, "I know you are not demons, but let me ask you, what is the deal with the demon whale beside you?" Zhang Moping quickly said, "It is a companion that has signed a contract with me." The middle-aged Taoist said, "A demon whale that is comparable to a Yuanian cultivator is willing to sign a contract with a core formation disciple like you. Can you tell me why?" Zhang Moping naturally could not tell the truth. He braced himself and said, "When I found the demon whale, it was in a deep sleep for a long time. Its body was weak and it was heavily injured. I helped it solve the problem, so it was willing to join you." The middle-aged Taoist scrutinized Yunjiang and said, "Now that the demons and evil have invaded the realm, the origin of your guardian beast is a little suspicious. Why don't you stay here for a few more days and wait for me to investigate? If there are no problems, I will let you go. Yun Jiang thought that the middle-aged Taoist had found out that there was a problem with her and could not help but be on guard. Sima Quan said, "There is no need to panic. This person has no killing intent. Moreover, with me here, even if you suffer a bit, you will not lose your life." Zhan Moping did not have the strength to resist. He hesitated and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhan Mang, what do you think?" Yun Jiang said, "Waiting a few days is good. With Sima Quan's help, if things really got out of hand, he could fly away and return to the Mountain Sea realm." Zhan Moping and the others waited uneasily for 3 days. Finally, there was a result of the investigation. The middle-aged Taoist compared it with the records and found that what Zhan Moping had said was basically true. He also confirmed that there was no qi of the evil on Yun Jiang. Thus, he did not stay here any longer and left with the other two. Zhan Moping watched them leave and relaxed. He felt that this trip had been really thrilling. He said, "We can leave this place now." Su Weiniang had a look of lingering fear. She asked worriedly, "Senior brother, is the realm about to be invaded by demons?" Zhan Moping comforted her. "With the perfected ones of the Azure world here, how could anything happen? Junior sister is thinking too much." The group walked quickly to the realm gate. He took out his talisman, and when a spiritual light enveloped him, he stepped into the realm. Su Weiniang and Yun Jiang followed him in. The scenery in front of them blurred, and they found themselves standing in an unfamiliar realm. The land here was vast, and the plains were either covered with gravel or half-buried skeletons of giant beasts. Zhan Moping heaved a sigh of relief. "We've finally reached the Pingshan realm." At this time, Yun Jiang said, "Fellow Taoist, you need to calm yourself down as soon as possible. The situation here is unclear, and it might not be a good thing if you encounter another enemy. The two of you can rest here for a while. I'm going to patrol around." Zhan Moping said gratefully, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Yun Jiang turned into a cloud of smoke and flew away. First, she circled the area and walked for dozens of miles. Finally, she landed in a valley and transformed back into her human form. She used her mana to open up a cave abode on the mountain wall. She then walked in and asked in a low voice, "Is Jinren Sima around?" After a while, a gust of chilly wind drifted around him. Then, an indistinct silhouette with an unidentifiable face appeared. He took out the dual realm dial from his sleeve and held it in front of him, saying, "This dial has never been used before. Jinren Yun, please receive it." Yun Jiang received it solemnly and said, "I will report this matter to the sect." Sima Quan said, "I will look after the surroundings. Jinren Yun can act without worry." Yun Jiang agreed and placed the two realms dial on a flat mountain rock. He reached out and pressed on it. A spiritual light rushed up, and after a while, Meng Zhen's figure appeared in the light. He bowed and said, "Disciple Yun Jiang greets Meng Zhen." Meng Zhen looked at him for a while and said in a low voice, "Yun Jiang, there was no news of you after you entered the realm. Now that you are fine, I believe Jinren Wei will be happy to know." Yun Jiang lowered his head and said in shame, "I shouldn't have worried you, teacher. It's just that the Yunshu realm is full of obstacles and countless restrictions. I couldn't find a chance in all these years. If it wasn't for Jinren Sima's arrival, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to send a message to the realm until now." Meng Zhen heard this, and his expression turned slightly serious. He said, "What is it like in the Yunshu realm? Tell me in detail." Chapter 1473. A Genius in a Second. Remember Love Go? Novel Network, to provide you with exciting novel reading. Yunshu Realm. Within the Azure Realm, the earth surged and the sky was high. It was still a desolate scene. Among the 12 powers of the White Realm, once someone reached the Elephant Realm, they would come here to continue cultivating. But at the same time, they would have to face the demons of the Crimson Realm that could charge into the realm at any time. The Azure Realm and the Purple Realm were closely connected and contained more than 60% of the spiritual opportunity in this realm. 30% was taken by the demons, and the remaining 10% belonged to the White Realm. The cultivators here all liked to hide their abodes in the sky and let them drift with the clear air. But today, the 4 abodes of the upper true level were all gathered in one place. There were only 5 cultivators of the mortal metamorphosis realm in the Yunshu realm. Other than the one with the highest cultivation who was guarding the ritual implement in the purple realm, the other 4 were all here. The 4 were similar in cultivation, and there was no difference between them, so they each took a position. Sitting on the east side was Yujirue, the dock master of Shinshio Dock. He had a black beard, a jade-like face, and eyebrows like smoke. He said, "Someone sent a message saying that a Yin Glow Monster's clone was found in the realm. Fellow Taoists must have heard of it." Yin Liang, the sect master of the virtuous Perching Water Veranda, had a look of displeasure on his face. The Yin Radiance demons were the most proficient in searching for the outside world. Normally, as long as one Yin Radiance demon entered the realm, it meant that the entire demonic race would arrive sooner or later. He rebuked, "I don't understand. The Pingshan realm has always been peaceful for tens of thousands of years. How did the Great Might Heavenly Palace manage to sneak in when it was their turn to guard it?" The person sitting on the south side looked to be in his 50s, but he was muscular and had dark hair. His eyes were deep. This was Ming Xianling, the lord of the Great Might Heavenly Palace. He said slowly, "Compared to the past, there are no loopholes. What's more, the 12 families guard the realm pass together, so the demon could have snuck in from somewhere else. How can fellow Taoist be so sure that this happened under the Great Might Heavenly Palace?" However, Yin Liang didn't let him go and said, "How could it have come from somewhere else? That evil demon clearly came from Pingshan realm." Ming Xianling said slowly, "Then fellow Taoist should be asking that person why they let the demon in." Yin Liang still wanted to say something, but at this time, an ethereal voice interrupted, "This matter has nothing to do with the Great Might Heavenly Palace." The 3 of them looked over. There was only a ball of crystal mist on top of it. It did not take on a human form. It was the leader of Fairy Mountain in Xian. After Chi Path cultivators obtained Dharma bodies, they could manifest all kinds of forms, but usually only the human form was the most suitable for cultivation. However, she was different from the rest because of her special technique. This sect's power wasn't that great, it couldn't even compare to the sects behind the 3 of them. However, the Tao companion of the previous Mountain Lord was the only one currently cultivating in the Purple Realm. Therefore, the 3 sects were extremely polite to her. Yin Liang asked, "Mountain Chieftain Yin said that this has nothing to do with the Great Might Heavenly Palace. Why is that?" Yin Xian pointed up and said, "It was done by that person." The 3 of them were all shocked. Yin Mu said, "Everyone, do you remember that whenever there is a lack of spirit opportunity in the inner realm, that person will open the door and try to lure the beings of the outer realm here? If they can find out where their inner realm is, then we can find it and take it over. Don't forget, once the door is opened, we can go out, but it also gives the demon a chance to come in." The 3 of them frowned. How many years had it been? This person had always been out of their control. He had even tied down the person with the highest cultivation among them, unable to extricate himself. Now, he had brought them such a huge problem. Yujirue sighed and said, "This demon has chased us for tens of thousands of years. Now it has found its way here. Compared to 10,000 years ago, our strength hasn't increased much. How can we be her opponent?" Back then, the void realm they were in was invaded by demons, and the 5 of them brought their disciples to escape. However, they did not expect to obtain a fortuitous encounter and be summoned to this place by that person. Dozens of lower realms appeared out of thin air, and the strength of the sect expanded by more than 10 times. However, that was all. Logically speaking, the sects had their own methods of inheritance and such a large amount of spirit opportunity. After 10,000 years of development, there should be a few more seats here. However, because that person needed to take most of the spirit opportunity, there was not much that they could really enjoy. Therefore, after 10,000 years, the battle strength of the upper echelons did not change at all. It was without a doubt impossible to fight against the demon with their current strength. At most, they could escape. However, They had lived in peace for 10,000 years, and no one wanted to escape again. Yin Liang's face was gloomy. He said, "Does anyone have a good plan to repel the enemy?" Yu Jurue stroked his beard and said, "If that person is willing to help, there will be no problem." Ming Xianling said, "To that person, it doesn't matter who stays in this realm. As long as they can help him search for spirit opportunity, it will be fine. He will not help us. Maybe those demons are more to his liking." Yin Liang scoffed, obviously dissatisfied with this. However, he did not refute, knowing that it was the truth. Yu Jurue said, "I wonder if there is a way in Fairy Mountain?" Wan and Yin both looked at Inemo. On the surface, they were asking about Fairy Mountain, but in reality, they were asking about the person who was hiding in the Purple Realm. Inemo said, "I do have an idea, but I'm afraid the three of you are not willing." Yu Jurue said, "Why don't you tell us? It won't be worse than now." Yin Xian said calmly, "Ask for help from other realms." Yin Liang was startled, but he did not reject it immediately. Instead, he asked, "That person found another outer realm?" Inemo said, "Not yet. It's just that a few days ago, the Great Might Heavenly Palace caught 2 disciples who were possessed by external demons." Ming Xianling said, "Let me tell you about this embarrassing matter. After these 2 disciples were possessed by external demons, their actions were normal. No one saw anything wrong. However, a few days ago, the spirit mirror emissary who was sent to search for demons took a look at the 2 of them according to the usual practice. At that time, they noticed something strange." Yu Jurue said, "Is it because of those demons?" Inemo said, "Not the same way. Those methods are very sinister, but they should be the work of a cultivator." Yu Jurue sighed and said, "To be able to sneak into our realm without being detected by the restrictions set by that person, it is enough to show that the background behind them is not simple." Yin Liang said, "They may not be comparable to the demons." Yu Jurue also admitted it. With a slightly complicated expression, he said, "Yes, they may not be comparable to those demons. They could infer from the actions of the other party that even if the power behind the person who sneaked in was stronger than them, the difference would not be too great. If there was an almighty existence that surpassed them, then there would be no need to investigate at all. They could just directly kill their way in." Yin Liang said, "If we can rope this person in to fight the demons with us, that would be the best. But why would these cultivators from beyond the heavens help us? If they were in their position, wouldn't it be better to watch me and the demons fight to the point where both sides are injured?" Ming Xianling said, "This is the crux of the matter. Therefore, we should take the initiative to release some information so that they can make the right choice. We must let them understand that if they are not willing to help us, then when this place is occupied by the demons, they will not be able to get anything." Yu Jurue thought about it and said, "We can give it a try. At worst, they will just ignore it." He turned his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, what do you think?" Yin Liang coldly said, "I just hope we are not leading a wolf into the house." Ming Xianling disagreed. "What wolf into the house? Once the demons came, they might not even be able to protect the Yunshu realm. If there were really cultivators from beyond the heavens interfering, they might be able to divert the disaster." At this moment, in the mountain and sea realm, Mengjin had also received news from Yunjiang and Sima Quan. He had a general understanding of the situation in the Yunshu realm. He immediately reported this matter to the sect master and asked for instructions on how to deal with the Yunshu realm. After sect master Qin considered it, he sent out a divine will to invite the various enlightened masters. Almost at the same time, the enlightened masters of the inner realm all felt something and released their divine wills. However, a moment later, they all landed in that mysterious space. After everyone greeted each other, Mengjin stood up and explained the matter of the Yunshu realm in detail. When Zhang Yan heard about the broken boundary, he revealed a pondering look and said, "During the human tribulation back then, the Jade Firmament sect used the space-breaking and world-chiseling technique to divide the 9 continents into the void, which is similar to the broken boundary." Ing Chuanqiu said, "However, that is only a mysterious technique that can only be used with the help of the Jade Cliff sect. It can't last long, but the Yunshu realm can last for tens of thousands of years. If it wasn't for a powerful cultivator, it could also be a magical treasure. Shui Dingyuan said, with such a division, the powerful cultivators will live where the spiritual opportunity is, while the weak cultivators will stay where they are weak. There is some truth to this. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I'm afraid this is not only to seize the spiritual opportunity, but also to guard against the powerful cultivators from beyond the heavens. With this division, even if there is a battle in the inner realm, it will only harm one place and not the other realms. Even if one place is destroyed, the spiritual opportunity can be transferred to another broken realm. The enlightened masters all nodded in agreement. Mengzhen asked, how do enlightened masters think we should treat the people of this realm? Ing Chuanxiu said, I think that since the Yunshu realm has an owner and has no conflict with me, we can ignore it. However, the outer realm is difficult to find and we can't give it up easily. The Jiaohua realm originally belonged to the Cloud Whale tribe. Now that the Cloud Whale tribe has formed an alliance with us, the 9 continents should ask for this place back for them. We also want the people of Yunshu realm to steal the spiritual opportunity from it. The original owner of the Jiaohua realm was the Cloud Whale tribe. If the 9 continents used this as an excuse, they would have the right to stand. Shui Dingyuan also said, the matter of the Jiaohua realm has to be solved, but the people of Yunshu realm seem to be afraid of the evil. We need to ask enlightened Master Sima to find out where they came from and how strong they are. Before we figure it out, we can wait and see. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, this realm and the evil have nothing to do with me now, but that may not be the case in the future. Fortunately, they are in the light and I am in the dark. We can first strengthen ourselves and slowly wait for the right time. Now time was on their side. Not to mention other things, after a period of time, when he refined the treasure that stabilized the realm or cut his past body and reached the second realm, his fighting ability would be greatly improved. Chapter 1474. A brilliant, multicolored light spread out from the void, like a resplendent belt of stars. This was the Tao of formation that the Qinsong school had set up here. To be more precise, this place was built by the disciples of the Xinyuan division alone, and did not take up any of the sect's resources. At this moment, the Tao of formation flickered with brilliant light, and a vortex appeared. It looked like it was sinking, and the people guarding the place could tell at a glance that someone was coming from the other side. After a while, a palace emerged from within. Within the cabin, Yuan Jianqing held a ghost stick in his hand and faced a pool that was about 30 meters wide. He was playing Seeking the Tao with Zhang Chan. This game of Go was originally very popular among the cultivators of the Junqian realm. Now that the people of the Junqian realm had pledged allegiance to them, this game of Go also spread to the mountain and sea realm. Because they saw the benefits of playing Go, the various sects of the 9 continents quickly adopted it, and it quickly spread. Zhang Chan thought hard for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up. He moved the Go stick, and the Go in front of him suddenly changed. Not only did it seem to come to life, but it also seemed to swallow up the wind and clouds. Yuan Jianqing nodded. This is a good move. Once the fish becomes a dragon, it flies to the sky, the rivers and the seas follow. Clear air washes away the fishy scales, and only one's body rises to the sky. Junior Brother Chan's move this time is like a rainbow, as graceful as a dragon. The wind and clouds really change. Before this momentum of yours dissipates, I can only retreat. Zhang Chan chuckled and then threw the Go stick away. This is as far as I can go. If I go any further, I won't be a match for Reverend Yuan. Seeking the way of chess. Playing chess was also seeking the way. It contained the various comprehensions he had on his path of cultivation. The path he had taken before was practically the various experiences he had on his path of cultivation. When he reached that step just now, he had leaped up and soared above the clouds. This had already evolved to his own limit. If he continued, he would have to use his current strength as a foundation to carve out a new path. However, Yuan Jingqing, his opponent, would be constantly obstructing him, causing countless changes. Thus, it was not as easy as truly seeking Tao. In fact, if he could make it through the game of chess, as long as his luck was not too bad, he would most likely be able to achieve something. Yuan Jianqing looked outside. Are we reaching the Scarlet Earth Star? There is still half a month left, said Yuan Jianqing. Please forgive me, Reverend Yuan. There are some demons that can come into the void. If we build the formation too close, we might be destroyed. Since there is still half a month left, why not continue? Asked Yuan Jianqing. Zhang Chan chuckled and said, There's no need for Zhenren to watch me make a fool of myself. My future path is unclear, but I can't go down anymore. Yuan Jingqing said calmly, Since you're from the mystic origin sect, how can you be afraid before the battle? Reverend Yuan Jianqing, don't look down on me. I'm not afraid of you, said Yuan Jianqing. With a wave of his hand, the chess stick flew back into his hand. It's just a game of chess. What's there to talk about? At this moment, the chess pieces in the pond floated along with the water. Another change was happening. Yuan Jianqing saw the opportunity and pushed the chess stick. After the carp leaping over the dragon's gate, it was not as good as just now. With Yuan Jingqing's push, the chess pieces fell even faster. Zhang Chan panicked. If he did not do anything, he would lose in less than half a month. He could not care less. He pushed the chess stick and turned the chess pieces around. How could Yuan Jianqing let him succeed so easily? He moved another chess piece. This time, it was aggressive. It was as if he wanted to cut off the dragon's head, pull out the dragon's tendons, and break the dragon's bones. Zhang Chan was even more nervous. He tried to salvage the situation. This game of chess was equivalent to an evolution of one's own path towards the Tao. So long as one didn't want one's Tao to be severed, then one would always try their best to obtain victory. Thus, the end of this game of chess was usually equivalent to a battle with one's peers, and one's spirit, energy, and essence would be greatly exhausted. Both sides of the chess game were killing each other. Half a month had passed unknowingly. Yuan Jianqing paused and looked outside. He saw a huge planet that was emitting red light. He kept the chess stick and passed it to Yuan Ping, who was standing at the side. Let's stop here, he said. Zhang Chan was still thinking about the game of chess just now. He looked up and said, Reverend Yuan, I have to thank you. Yuan Jianqing said, You don't have to thank me. It's not up to me to decide how far junior brother Chan can go. This is your own Tao. You and I were just playing a game of chess. Zhang Chan laughed and said, Not bad, not bad. Reverend Yuan also gained something. Yuan Jianqing agreed, Indeed. Zhang Chan also shifted his gaze to the outside, pointed and said, Zhenren Yuan, you must have seen it. This is the red scorching earth star. Ferocious demons are everywhere, and there are monsters everywhere. My insects can roam freely in other places, but they can't be used here. Not to mention the land, they can't even cross the red light. However, there must be a treasure hidden here, otherwise, how could there be such a strange aura? Yuan Jianqing said, I'm here to solve this problem. Zhang Chan said, Then I'll go back and sleep first. I'll come back to call you when I'm full of energy. Yuan Jianqing also nodded. The two of them played a game of chess. Although they both benefited from it, the consumption was not small. It was impossible for them to go down at this time. They both returned to their cave residences to adjust their breath, to recover their vitality. 5 days later, 2 rays of conveyance light flew out of the palace and flew towards the huge planet in front of them. Soon, they disappeared into the red light one after another. As Yuan Jianqing approached, he felt a burning sensation surging up his body. It seemed to be because of the red light. He had heard about this situation from Zhang Chan earlier. He used his mana and forced it back a little. After about an hour, the two of them finally passed through the red light and saw the planet beneath their feet. The strange thing was that although the outside looked like it was dyed in blood, the bottom looked like a beautiful landscape. The spiritual vigor was also abundant. Zhang Chan laughed and said, Reverend Yuan, don't look at the beautiful scenery below. The living creatures here are very cruel. Look over there, they have sensed our qi and are coming over. Yuan Jianqing turned around and saw densely packed black spots coming over. They were monsters that looked like goats with a horn on their head and a pair of wings on their back. Zhang Chan smacked his lips and said, "Reverend Yuan, you don't know this. The flying goats have delicious meat. I can't forget it after eating it once." Demonic insects like him usually absorbed the blood essence of their prey. They were not essential to the flesh. However, the demons here were unusually delicious for him. Yuan Zhangqing suddenly asked, "Is this monster especially delicious, or are all monsters like this?" Zhang Chan thought for a while and said, "I don't know if all monsters are like this, but at least the ones that I've eaten make my mouth water when I think about them." Yuan Zhangqing said, "Then there must be something hidden in the flesh of this monster that made you so obsessed with it." Zhang Chan did not think about this at first, but after this reminder, he came to a realization and said, "That makes sense. There is an unusual qi dynamic hidden in the flesh. It must be this thing that attracted me." Yuan Zhangqing said, "Since there's nothing else but here, maybe the abnormality of this planet has something to do with it." He opened his hand and several spiritual shuttles flew out and entered the bodies of the strange beasts. The beasts fell from the sky one by one. After that, he released a stream of mana and captured the strange beast that looked like the leader. After checking it, he realized that there was a strange spiritual vigor hidden in the flesh. How could he sense the existence of this thing? However, no matter how he looked, he could not find it. It was very strange. However, it was not a big deal. The living creatures on this planet would not change for no reason. There must be a reason for it. As long as he found the reason, he could solve the mystery. Zhang Chan took advantage of this moment and went up to eat to her heart's content. Only then did she return satisfied. However, after a short delay, a large group of monsters of different appearances flew over. Yuan Zhangqing was not in the mood to get entangled with these beasts. He kept his qi dynamic and felt that he needed a place to stay. He said, "Junior brother Chan said that you set up a cave abode here. I wonder where it is?" Zhang Chan said, "Follow me, Zhenren." As he said this, he dived down to the ground. Yuan Zhangqing also cast a conveyance light and followed. The two of them traveled for a day and landed on a desolate island. At the top of the sea cliff, they could see a cave abode. Zhang Chan said, "Initially, I set up the cave abode on land and put down formation flags. However, the beasts and demonic insects here sensed the qi dynamic and came over. Moreover, they were not afraid of death. After a few days, it was destroyed. Even if I placed it underground, it would not work. Later, I placed it in the sky, but there were countless ferocious birds in the sky. I could only place it on the sea." Yuan Zhangqing said, "There is more seawater here than on land. Could it be that there are no ferocious beasts here?" Zhang Chan said, "That's not the case. It's just that the greater demons in the sea are huge, and their preferences are different from those on land. My restrictive spell is only to conceal the qi dynamic and is not an offensive or defensive spell formation. Furthermore, the island is barren and does not have any vegetation. In their eyes, it is nothing more than a few broken rocks. They would not care about it." Yuan Zhangqing landed and sensed that there was a demonic fish that was comparable to a great saint of the mountain and sea realm. However, it was not moving at all. Zhang Chan said, "It's a good thing that such a big fish is here. It sees this place as its own territory. When the demons from the outside come, it will fight them." Yuan Zhangqing followed him into the immortal's cave. He found that it was decorated very well. There was a thick blanket under his feet, which was completely white. The walls of the cave were inlaid with rows of pearls the size of longans. There was also a prayer mat, an incense burner, a table, and a few pavilions. Everything was complete, and there was even a pond of tranquil water. Zhang Chan pushed open the stone door to reveal an inner chamber. He said, "I have killed and eaten the ferocious beasts, and the rest have been injected with medicinal pills to put them to sleep. There are more than 200 of them here. I was planning to bring them back to the sect and offer them to the master. If you are interested, Reverend Yuan, you can wake them up and take a look." Yuan Zhangqing nodded and said, "That saves me a lot of effort." He walked in and looked up. Zhang Chan had hollowed out the belly of the mountain and made it look like a beehive. In every cave, there was a slumbering demon. Zhang Chan followed him in and said proudly, "I spent years searching for these." "What do you think, Reverend Yuan?" "Most of the powerful demons on this continent are here, except for a few that I don't dare to provoke." Yuan Zhangqing looked at it and said, "Since junior brother Chan has prepared these for master, it won't be complete without a few types of demons. After I look around, I will go with you and capture them." Zhang Chan said happily, "Good, good. With Reverend Yuan's help, we will definitely be able to capture them easily." Chapter 1475. Yuan Zhangqing stayed on the red scorching earth star for 3 years. During this period, he and Zhang Chan worked together and killed countless poisonous insects and ferocious demons, greatly enriching the treasury on the island. However, there was a strange thing. All the creatures born in this place, regardless of their size, seemed to be stained with that strange thing. This was not the only strange thing. This was clearly just an earth star. Perhaps the size was slightly larger, but it was not to such an exaggerated extent. However, there were endless powerful demons, and there were many that were comparable to demon saints. Fortunately, the two of them had not met the likes of the demon ancestors so far. But thinking about it, it made sense. Only the boundless mountains, seas, and land could support such a great demon. Otherwise, with just a slight movement from this demon, it could cause the entire planet to collapse. On the plains, the body of a huge beast slowly collapsed, like a collapsing mountain range, shaking the earth. Blood flowed like a river, flowing in all directions. The smell of blood spread for dozens of miles, causing countless demonic birds in the sky to scream and swoop down. Zhang Chan said loudly, "Zhenren Yuan, this group of beasts is here to steal our food again. Thank you for your help." Yuan Zhangqing waved his hand and a cloud appeared in the sky. All the demon birds entered it and immediately became dizzy. They kept spinning inside and could not come out at all. After fighting with demons for a few years, he became more and more proficient in controlling his mana. He could easily confuse the senses of these demons. Zhang Chan, on the other hand, stepped forward and inhaled. He drew out a wisp of blood light from the demon corpse and swallowed it. After a short while, the profound qi in his body grew a little stronger. His face was flushed red and he said, "Although the demons here are fierce, their blood qi is really rich. It's like a great tonic." Yuan Jingqing looked up at the sky. The ferocious birds were unable to approach their target for a long time, and they actually started to tear at each other. Broken feathers and limbs kept falling from the sky. With a wave of his sleeve, a strong gust of wind blew them away, and he said, "But we still haven't found the cause of the abnormality. The spiritual opportunity here was abundant, and it would be a pity if they did not make use of it. Furthermore, the array formation had already been built here, and they could not just let it go to waste. However, if they did not find out the reason, it would be difficult for them to establish a foothold here." Zhang Chan patted his belly and said, "Don't worry, Spiritual Master Jing. I've devoured a lot of monsters recently, so I can vaguely sense something. I believe that I'll be able to find out the truth after I devour a few more monsters." Yuan Zhangqing said, "As long as junior brother Chan is confident, it's fine. It's just killing a few more demons." Zhang Chan rolled his eyes and said, "My strength has increased a little. I can try to capture that long-eared monster now." Yuan Zhangqing said, "That monster is not simple. It seems to have intelligence. We should capture it and examine it." The monster they were talking about was a long-eared monster. Although its body was not big, it could fly up into the sky, dive into the ground, and swim in the water. Moreover, its recovery ability was impressive, and its injuries were healed in the blink of an eye. Not only that, ever since the two of them arrived on Earth Star, it was the first time that they encountered a monster that knew how to escape if they could not defeat it. Therefore, they did not guard against it, and it escaped into the sea. Fortunately, there seemed to be something in that area that it could not bear to part with. Therefore, it returned not long after. The two of them were thinking that they might be able to uncover some secrets from it. After discussing it earlier, they felt that they were not completely confident in capturing it, so they did not bother with it anymore. Now that their skills had improved a lot, they could try to capture it. The two of them left the monster's corpse there and returned to the cave abode on the sea. After resting for a few days, they headed towards the place where the long-eared monster was. They did not travel on land, but took a big detour and took a detour from the sea. This way, they could prevent the monster from escaping into the sea again. Half a day later, the two of them had crossed the sea and arrived on land. Yuan Jingqing closed his eyes and sensed for a moment, then opened them and said, "The monster is not far ahead." Zhang Chan said excitedly, "This time, it won't be able to escape." The two of them approached quickly, and from far away, they saw a small beast lying in the grass. It had a pair of rabbit ears and looked like a leopard. Its head was big and its body was small, and it was fluffy. However, it looked very agile, and its nose was constantly moving, as if it was looking for something. All of a sudden, it shuddered and turned around to look. It saw two streaks of light flying towards it, so it immediately leaped up and flipped into the clouds, and its speed was extremely swift. Yuan Jingqing and Zhang Chan followed closely. This small monster was very cunning, and if they were not careful, it could slip away. The long-eared monster came to the sky above a valley, and its body curled up and fell into the grass. Then, it ran deep into the valley. Zhang Chan saw its escape route and couldn't help but curse, "How cunning!" This place was obviously the territory of a big monster, and this long-eared monster was trying to lure them there to stop them. However, this time, it made a mistake. Yuan Jingqing took out a spell, and the two of them immediately hid their aura. Although the rays of light were still around them, all the monsters ignored them. This was using the sensory nerve to conceal its external senses. As long as he could sustain it with his arcane energy, those monsters without intelligence would not be able to detect him. The two of them were well prepared this time. This time, the long-eared monster did not run far before they caught up. Yuan Jingqing pointed downwards, and it could only turn around on the spot. Perhaps knowing that it could not escape, it hugged its head and covered its eyes with its two long ears, and shouted on the ground, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." Its voice was like a young girl's, and it sounded very crisp. Zhang Chan said curiously, "Being able to speak human language, it really has intelligence." Yuan Jingqing said, "You're right. Looks like this pair of long ears isn't just for show." Zhang Chan was shocked, and then he clicked his tongue. This meant that not only did it hear their conversation, it even learned it. However, those were only words that did not affect the overall situation. When it came to the matters of the sect, the two of them used telepathy to communicate, so there was no need to worry about it being leaked. Yuan Jingqing stretched out his hand and took the long-eared monster, and held it in his palm and said, "Do you have a name?" The long-eared monster's body trembled slightly, and said, "This little monster's name is Yuchio." Yuan Jingqing said, "Most of the monsters on this planet are wild and violent, and they are driven by their nature, but you have intelligence. Can you tell me why?" Yuchio said, "I don't know what happened, I just slept on a boundary, and then I can speak." Zhang Chan said, "Where is that boundary?" Yuchio twisted his body, and said reluctantly, "It's the boundary where I came from." Yuan Jingqing said, "You've been lingering there, are you trying to find the thing that can make you speak?" Yuchio nodded repeatedly. Zhang Chan's eyes lit up and he said, "I didn't expect that the thing we're looking for is so close." Yuan Jingqing said, "Whether it's what we're looking for, we'll know after we take a look." The two of them immediately turned back, and not long after, they arrived at the boundary. They didn't notice it the last time they came, but this time, there were many collapsed rocks among the weeds, and there were traces of artificial polishing. It seemed that there was once an intelligent creature living here. Yuan Jingqing tried to sense for a long time, but he could vaguely sense that there seemed to be a hole below. Logically speaking, with his current ability, he could clearly see thousands of feet below with a single glance. However, there was an obstruction here, so someone must have done something to it. He passed the Yuchio in his hand to Zhang Chan, and said, "There's something strange here, junior brother Chan, look after this little demon, I'll go down and take a look." Zhang Chan patted his chest and said, "Jinren Yuan, don't worry, with me watching, it won't be able to escape. Yuan Zhangqing took out a talisman, and with the activation of his mana, it turned into a 5-colored spiritual light, and then he went down into the depths of the ground. The talisman was the 5 Elements Escape Talisman given by Zhang Yan, and it could help him travel freely underground. Although he could do it with his current mana, it wasn't as easy as it was now. He didn't know how far down he went, but he felt some obstruction. He used his mana to protect himself, and after a while, he found that there was no danger inside, so he pushed forward, and he had already broken through. When he looked up, he found that he had come to an empty cave, and the ground was full of cracks, and there was a thick layer of dust. He looked around, and it didn't feel like this place was dug out, but it was shaken by some kind of qi dynamic, and it was slowly eroded and hollowed out. The process seemed to be continuing, but at the same time, it seemed like some kind of power was suppressing it, and it couldn't be released. He paused for a moment, and then he followed the source of the qi dynamic. After about 100 miles, he saw a light in front of him, and looking at it, he saw a soft jade ball floating in the air in front of him. It was about the size of a fist, and a soft light bloomed from it. He couldn't see through what it was, so he didn't dare to be careless. He raised his finger, and a mana doppelganger appeared, and slowly floated in that direction. It didn't meet any obstacles along the way, and it smoothly arrived in front of that thing. He looked at it carefully, but he didn't act rashly. But at this moment, there was a thought transmitted from that thing, as if it was begging him to take it away. Yuan Jingqing observed it with concentration. Logically speaking, it should be a living being that was capable of transmitting thoughts, but he couldn't sense a trace of vitality from this thing. Moreover, he faintly had the feeling that if he were to rashly take this thing away, then it would definitely cause unforeseen consequences. In fact, even if he did this, he might not succeed. He closed his eyes and sensed for a while, and he could clearly feel 2 qi dynamics colliding with each other, especially the power outside, which was vast and surging, like a ferocious and boundless ocean. A thought flashed through his mind. If the qi activity in this place was coming from this soft jade ball, then where did it come from outside? Previously, he couldn't find out, but now here he could use the soft qi dynamics to push it back, and use Yuan Chen's sensory nerve to illuminate it. As he thought of this, he immediately sat down cross-legged. He used all his concentration to circulate the skill, and after a long time, in his mind, the entire red-burning Earth star shone in. And at this moment, he finally understood that this place full of red light was not some Earth star, but a drop of blood essence, a drop of pure and flawless blood essence. Chapter 1476. Yuan Zhangqing took a deep breath. No wonder the demons in the planet were so violent, and most of them were irrational. It was all due to the influence of this drop of blood. But who was the owner of this blood? It looked like this had been going on for tens of thousands of years, and there was no sign of it fading away. On the contrary, it made this place abnormally rich with spiritual vigor. This was very scary. As far as he knew, without enough spiritual vigor, a mortal metamorphosis cultivator might not be able to live for tens of thousands of years just by consuming his primordial qi. However, this was only limited to the first mortal metamorphosis realm. As for those who had cut off their past and future bodies, they could not be estimated with common sense. Also, if it was a cultivator of Qi Dao at this stage, he would have long abandoned his physical body and only used his Dharma body to stay in the world. Naturally, there would not be any blood. Therefore, the biggest possibility was that the person who left the blood was not a human but a different species. By the same logic, this jade was firmly suppressed here by this drop of blood essence, so it was clearly not an ordinary object. Yuan Zhangqing pondered for a long time. He felt that this matter was not something he could solve. He wanted to report this matter to the sect and let his master decide how to deal with it. He did not touch the soft jade and used the talisman to escape. Not long after, he returned to the surface. Jing Yu saw him coming up and asked, "Zhenren Jing, did you find anything?" Yuan Zhangqing said, "I found something. I roughly know the source of the abnormality of this planet. However, I'm afraid the matter behind this is not something I can interfere with." I need to go back and report to my master. Jing Yu saw that he was serious. Although he was curious, he knew the rules and did not ask any more. He said, "Do you want to report to master? All right, I haven't returned to the sect for a long time. This time I will go back with you." He looked at the fur coat in his hand and asked, "What about this long-eared little demon?" Yuan Zhangqing looked and said, "This little demon is also related to this matter. Let's bring it back as well." Zhang Chan took out a beast trap and put it in, ignoring the fur coat's complaints. He said, "Since we are going back, why don't we bring the demon in the cave as well?" Yuan Zhangqing said, "These are your gains, Junior Martial Brother Chan. Of course, it's up to you to decide." Zhang Chan said, "Then there's no need to wait. We'll depart soon." After the two finished their discussion, they flew back to the cave abode. After entering the cave, Zhang Chan tossed out a spiritual boat and put all the demons into it. Since he might have to come back, he left the rest of the things in the cave abode. Then, the two of them rode the spiritual boat and turned into a rainbow light, breaking through the atmosphere and heading toward the outer space. However, this time, Yuan Zhangqing found that there were many ribbon-like fish in the red light. Alarmed by the spiritual boat, they swarmed toward it at high speed. He asked, "What are these? I didn't see him on the way here." Zhang Chan said, "I don't know what these things are, but they're very fierce and can even wear down spiritual vigor restriction spells. When I came here the first time, I wasn't prepared, and the spiritual boat was bitten by them. This time, I won't let them succeed." Last time, he made a mistake because he didn't know what was going on. This time, he drove the spiritual boat carefully and flew at full speed, so he easily got rid of these gossamer fish. Soon, the two of them returned to the palace that was hovering in the void. Here, they didn't need to be wary of those demons anymore. Yuan Zhangqing looked at the path-seeking chess in the pond and said, "On the way back, I wanted to play a game with Junior Martial Brother Chan, but the outcome of this game has been decided, so there's no need to play anymore." Hearing this, Zhang Chan wasn't convinced. He rolled up his sleeves, grabbed the chess stick, and leaped onto the stone platform. He pointed at it and said, "Zhenren Jing, don't look down on me. Come, let's continue." Yuan Zhangqing said, "Since Junior Martial Brother Chan insists, I'll play with you this time." He grabbed the chess stick and stood still on the stone platform. As the two of them played, there were about 10 disciples working together to control the wheel and steer the palace back. Because of the formation, their return journey was very fast. In less than a year, the palace appeared on the mountain and sea land. But now that they were here, they couldn't fly as freely as before. In the past, to guard against possible invasion from the outer space, this place was filled with restrictive formations. Later, when the Junshin realm was pacified, because of the dangers in the outer space, no one knew if there would be living beings from the outer space breaking in. It was necessary for such a barrier to exist, so they didn't remove it. Therefore, after a few more days, the two of them both of them were able to pass through the restrictive formations and land in the Dragon Abyss Sea Marsh. In the Xinyuan small world, Zhang Yan sat on the cliff. From time to time, he would use his mana to move the earth fire. At this moment, the dragon heart above the heavenly cauldron of earth fire had become faintly discernible, as if it was covered by a thin layer of gauze. This was because the Xianyuan small world was gradually merging into one. What he saw here was the part that had not been completely refined. After he succeeded, this item would no longer exist alone. It would become a part of the entire small world. By then, he would be on the right path. At this moment, Jing Yu walked up from the foot of the mountain. Seeing that the cauldron was burning, he took a few steps back and waited at the side with his head lowered. Zhang Yan retracted some of his mana and asked, "What's the matter?" Jing Yu bowed and said, "Master, Zhenren Yuan and Chan Langjun have returned to the sect. They are asking for an audience outside the hall. They said that they found something in the virtual sky and wanted to report it to you." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Call them in." Jing Yu bowed, turned around and left. After a long time, the door between the two worlds opened under the cliff. Yuan Zhangqing and Zhang Chan both came to the small world. Jing Yu took out the talisman and opened the prohibition in front of the mountain. He said, Master is on the cliff. You two can go on your own. Yuan Jianqing said, Thank you, junior apprentice brother Jing. Jingyu smiled and said, It's all right. I still have things to do in the hall. I won't be accompanying you. Yuan Jianqing and Zhang Chan saw that there was a prohibition set up here. They knew that it must be an important place. Thus, they did not fly but walked up the mountain steps. After about 2 hours, they arrived at the peak of the mountain. From here, they could see the heavenly cauldron of earth fire that was surrounded by the cliff. They could also vaguely see the dragon heart in the middle. Zhang Chan took a look and said in a low voice, Zhenren Jing, is Master refining a talisman? Yuan Jianqing could feel that the dragon heart was somewhat extraordinary. He said, That should be the case. The two of them arrived at Zhang Yan's seat and bowed. Yuan Jianqing said, Disciple greets Master. Zhang Yan made a few hand seals to slightly suppress the fire in the cauldron. He retracted his mana and ordered Mountain River Child to continue taking care of it. Then he pointed to the front and said, Come and take a look. This item will be the Xianyuan lineage's treasure in the future. However, it is only roughly refined now. In my plan, if this treasure is completed, it will not be limited to itself. It will be like that living creature, with unlimited possibilities. Zhang Chan was shocked. He said, Master, are you talking about the living refinement technique that can refine a demon intercepting technique? Zhang Yan smiled and said, This is indeed a reference to the living refinement technique, but it is not completely the same. I don't want an independent living creature, but a treasure that can protect my lineage. Speaking up to this point, he looked at the two of them and said, Just now, Jingyun, did you two find anything this time? Yuan Jianqing took a step forward and bowed. He said, Master, after I received orders to go to the red scorching earth star, I felt that this star was very strange and unreasonable. Later, I joined forces with junior brother Jing to investigate for 3 years and found that there was an item suppressed deep under the ground. However, it was only a drop of blood that was used to suppress this item. We don't know who left this drop of blood, but not only did it exist for tens of thousands of years, it even covered the entire Earth star. It's really amazing. Zhang Chan also just found out about this. He was extremely shocked and his eyes widened. Using a drop of blood to cover the Earth star, even the demon ancestor might not be able to do that, right? Zhang Yan's expression was the same as ever. He only said, Such a drop of blood, the owner must not be simple. Yuan Jianqing said, Disciple also thought so, so I didn't dare to act rashly. I wanted to come back and report it to Master. Zhang Yan said, In your opinion, who left it behind? Yuan Jianqing said, Disciple heard rumors about Bo Bai and Bo Xian after coming to the mountain and sea realm. If it was left behind by a creature from the inner realm, could it be related to those two? Zhang Yan shook his head and said, If the two of them really are as powerful as the legends say, then this drop of blood has nothing to do with them. Yuan Jianqing bowed and said, Disciple doesn't understand the mysteries, Master. Please enlighten me. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Because your realm is not high enough, it is difficult for you to determine the true cultivation of the owner of the blood. In fact, there is someone in my Qinsong school who can do such a thing. Yuan Jianqing thought for a moment and said, Is it Taoist Ingui? Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. In truth, his strength had already reached the 6th revolution, but he hadn't found the root of it yet. If he wanted to, it wouldn't be difficult for him to create such a scene. Zhang Chan suddenly asked, Master, if Bo Bai and Bo Xian are really here, what kind of method would they use? Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, I haven't reached such a realm, so I can't say for sure. But if they really have that kind of ability, it would be normal for them to destroy a realm. Why would they need to use blood to suppress external objects? Besides, what living beings feel might not be true. It's like how we stand above the sun and moon. The living beings on Earth believe that since ancient times, Bo Bai and Bo Xian have been in control of the world. But that is only the afterimage of the radiance of the stars. In reality, there are no such things. Yuan Jianqing said, In that case, the mountain and sea realm never had Bo Bai and Bo Xian. Is it just a figment of the ancient living beings of this realm? Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That's not necessarily the case. Rumors come from an empty cave, but there is a reason. Even if such people existed, they wouldn't let ordinary living beings see them. Although there is something strange about this blood essence, since you can sense it so easily, it is most likely not an almighty being that can't be fought against. Master thinks that it might be an alien like the Great Kuan. From his point of view, the blood essence was actually a trace left behind. If one's cultivation base was high enough, they could trace it back to its source and see its true appearance. Even if that wasn't the case, they would still be able to deduce its general strength. Yuan Zhenking said, "Master, how should we handle this matter?" Zhang Yan thought about it for a moment, then said, "I will go personally. If this person has left, then so be it. But if he is still in the mountain and sea realm, then I will have to find him. That way, there won't be any hidden dangers." Chapter 1477. Since Zhang Yan had made his decision, Yuan Zhenking and Zhang Chan were relieved. They did not need to intervene in the follow-up matters. Zhang Chan said, "Master, I have brought a lot of monsters from the Earth Star to present to you." Zhang Yan nodded, "You're too considerate. When we return, you should place them in the Azure Sky Hall." The Azure Sky Palace had found a lot of monsters and grass spirits over the years. The variety of living creatures had become very rich. Moreover, he had reshaped the land and created many spiritual mountains and rivers. It was also full of spiritual vigor. Now it was a blessed land outside the mansion. Moreover, after these monsters had cultivated for a long time, they could also become the helpers of the Xinyuan sect in the future. They could be used to guard the cave, or become a mount or a protector. They could even be released to serve the disciples. Zhang Chan agreed. At this moment, he seemed to have thought of something. He patted his head and said, "Oh right, I almost forgot." He took out the beast trap and released the fur coat from it. He said, "Master, and this little demon. I have been in the red scorching earth star with Zhenren Yuan for many years. I am afraid that because of the blood essence, most of the monsters are violent and tyrannical. Only this demon has not been infected. Instead, it has developed spiritual wisdom. Zhenren Yuan and I both thought that it was because it had benefited from the thing that was suppressed." The fur coat had been trapped for a long time. When it suddenly saw the light of day again, it instinctively wanted to jump a few times. However, it seemed to be very sensitive to the changes in the outside world. It sensed that there was a breath here that was as vast as the sea. In front of this breath, even the most ferocious big demon on the red scorching earth star was like a small insect. It could not be compared to this breath. Immediately, it stayed where it was and did not dare to move. Zhang Yan glanced at it. He could see that this little demon had indeed received some kind of external favor. Its blood essence and spiritual wisdom had been greatly improved. If it was an ordinary demon before, now it could be called a spiritual beast. Just now, from what Yuan Zhenking had said, the thing that caused this anomaly must be the thing that was suppressed by the blood essence. He didn't know what kind of thing could actually have such a method. His interest was suddenly piqued. He didn't know how far this demon could go in the future. He said, "Send this demon under Zihong's tutelage. He can do whatever he wants with it." Zhang Chan bowed and said, "This lowly one understands." Zhang Yan came down and asked about the details of the Scarlet Earth Star, then gave them a few pointers and said, "You two can go now. Zhang Chan hasn't been back to the Shanghai continent for a long time. I'll allow you to stay here for a few more days." Zhang Chan said happily, "Thank you, Master." Zhang Yan gently waved his sleeve. He and Yuan Zhenking bowed, then stepped down from the cliff and left the small world. After sitting for a while, his spirit intent rose and he informed Sect Master Qin that he wanted to go to Planet Virtual Sky and Earth Star to find the owner of the blood essence. Sect Master Qin said, "To be able to preserve the blood essence for 10,000 years, its strength isn't weak. Hall Master Du Zhen's trip might not be peaceful. A few days ago, Junshin World offered some purple clear great medicine. Take some with you." After Junshin World was pacified, Rao Jifeng and Bei Xiangtong had kept a lot of purple clear spiritual vigor. They didn't dare to keep it for themselves, so they refined it into great medicine and offered it. Qinsong, Shaoqing, and Lingmen sects each got a portion. Zhang Yan bowed and said, "Thank you, sect master." If the owner of the blood essence had already broken the world and left, he would be able to come back soon. If it was still in the world, then he would have to find it. There was no formation path in the depths of the void, so it might take a long time. Moreover, he might encounter enemies, so it was necessary to bring the great medicine along. Speaking of which, with Rao Jifeng and Bei Xiangtong's continuous delivery of purple clear spiritual vigor, including the few reverence fan too inside, they would have more time to cultivate in the future. They were all considering if they should let the Gong brothers who were still trapped in the small pot world to do this, but it was not decided yet. A few days later, after Zhang Yan settled the matters in the cave abode, he called Pig Bull to board a palace and headed towards the formation path in the sky. There were a few halls built around the formation path in the Mystic Essence faction, and there were many cultivators coming and going. From time to time, he would see some barbarians with tentacles growing on their heads, but most of the people here were mystic cultivators from the 100 countries of Eastern Wasteland. After the demons and beasts at the periphery of Eastern Wasteland were suppressed, there were no longer any great threats. In order to avoid internal conflicts, the 100 countries also made many vows of alliance, and the stronger demons in the 100 South Sea continent were restrained by the Bull Dragon clan, so they no longer headed north. There were no strong enemies outside, and there were no killings inside. This period of time could be said to be the most peaceful period for the countries of Eastern Wasteland in tens of thousands of years. Many disciples of the Academy had the idea of traveling around, and going to the stars above the sea of mountains and seas was something worth boasting about when they came back. Many of them were willing to pay a great price to travel to the virtual sky, but the price was also very high. Therefore, those who could come here were mostly of noble birth. The person guarding the formation path saw a palace coming, and his expression changed. He recognized it and suddenly stood up, saying, "It's the ancestral master's dermic carriage. Order everyone to leave." As the order was given, everyone was moved to the surrounding halls by the teleportation formation. At the same time, layers of restrictive formations were activated, and countless lights flashed. This wasn't to guard against anyone, but to protect the formation path and the many temples here. The morale force of ordinary cultivators was too great, and even if they tried their best to restrain it, it could still cause violent tremors when passing through the formation path. After a while, a dazzling rainbow like the Milky Way spread out and shone on the palace, guiding it towards the formation path. In the palace, a 13 or 14-year-old youth stood on the platform of the temple, looking at the starry sky. This was the young master of the Shu Hua nation, Yuan Jingqian. He looked at the incoming palace and asked the elder standing beside him, "Elder Zai, do you think that's the dermic carriage of Lord Xianyuan?" Elder Zai bowed and said, "Young master, you're right. That's the dermic carriage of Lord Xianyuan." Yuan Jingqian's eyes lit up and he said, "In another year, my father will send me to the north to cultivate, and I haven't decided which sect to choose. Elder Zai, what do you think about enrolling in Qinsong school?" All these years, the feudal lords would invite cultivators to check the aptitude of their children, and his aptitude was determined to be the best. The sects that were out of reach for others were easy for him to enter. Zai Daoren said, "Qinsong school is only on par with Shaoqing among the sects in the 9 continents, and they have many cultivation techniques, which is good. However, I think that if young master enters another sect, you might be able to achieve something, and it might be easier." Yuan Jianxian was puzzled. "Why is that?" Elder Zai pointed out, "There are many disciples in Qinsong school, and there are countless people with outstanding aptitudes. It's difficult to stand out. On the other hand, other sects have fewer competitors, and it's easier for them to stand out. If they are recognized by the elders of the sect, their achievements might not be low." Yuan Jingqian shook his head and said, "Tigers and leopards don't associate with jackals and wolves. If all they see are mediocre people, then no matter how talented they are, they will only be mediocre." Elder Zai showed a gratified expression and said, Young master has great ambitions, unlike this old man. With young master here, there's no need to worry about the future of the Shu Hua nation. Yuan Jingqian was a little embarrassed by his words, and he said, I'm not as good as Elder Zai said. Elder Zai's words are the truth, and I can tell. It's just that there's a chance in front of me, and if I don't fight for it, I'll feel a little unwilling in my heart. Elder Zai said seriously, if young master wants to do it, then do it. Although it said that mystic cultivators can cultivate to the state of purple sun, other than the 3 high priests of the past, and the few great mystic cultivators, no one has been able to enter this door. Looking at the world, only the path of cultivating qi seems to be endless. Young master, you have to grasp this opportunity well. Don't say things that will betray your country, but first, don't betray yourself. Yuan Jingqian put his hands together and said sincerely, I will remember Elder Zai's words. While the two of them were talking, the huge palace had already passed through the path of arrays, and everyone felt a slight tremor under their feet. The spiritual light that was emitted by the arrays only dissipated after a long time. After traveling through the path of arrays for half a year, the palace appeared on the other side. Zhang Yan looked over and very quickly he found the location of the Crimson Expanse Earth Star among the many stars. He sat on the back of the boar bull, and with a thought, he teleported across the void and arrived in front of the Earth Star. As he arrived, the star in front of him started to rumble, and he could see a sudden flood on the surface of the Earth, and the Earth was spitting fire. Because of his approach, the drop of blood essence felt a great pressure, and that was why it had such a reaction. If he insisted on going forward, it might just collapse. Zhang Yan was here for the whereabouts of the owner of the drop of blood essence. There might be some clues left on this Earth Star, and he did not want to destroy it. Moreover, the spiritual vigor here was abundant, and it might become a lower house in the future. Therefore, when he noticed this, he restrained his qi dynamic a little. When a cultivator of the qi Dao reached the second stage, he could see the past. Now, his cultivation had not reached this stage, but just by holding a wisp of blood essence in his hand, he could deduce the original level of the owner. He stretched out his hand and caught a scarlet light. After sensing it for a moment, he could immediately determine that this was the essence blood of a different species. Moreover, it had already entered the end of its lifespan. Back then, its cultivation seemed to be a level higher than the sky ghost demon ancestor that he had seen, but it wasn't too much. If it still existed, due to the limited life force of a living being, its strength might not rise but fall. He looked up and saw that the Earth Star had calmed down. He thought for a moment, then separated a shadow avatar and passed through the red atmosphere. Soon, he arrived on the surface of the Earth, identified the direction, and flew toward the place that Yuan Jingqian had mentioned before. Wherever this avatar passed, all the monsters seemed to be unaware. This was not the kind of concealment technique, but he had already formed a world of his own. At this moment, he restrained his qi dynamic, and in the eyes of many creatures, he did not exist, so naturally, they would not have any reaction. Not long after, he came to the sky above the boundary. When he arrived here, he could feel that there was a huge crack below, and there was also a huge strip-shaped hole in the ground. Judging in his heart, it was obvious that the original location of the suppressed thing was not here, but when it sensed that there was a crack in the ground, it wanted to escape from here, so it spent more than 10,000 years to move here from another direction. After looking, he sank the avatar, turned into a golden light, and flew underground. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.